Board of Adjustment, which is being held on Wednesday, the 27th of June, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. in the Municipal Complex. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this regular meeting has been provided by prominently displaying the schedule of regular meetings on the official notice board in the Municipal Complex, and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Trenton Times, the Trentonian, and Comcast Cable of New Jersey, Inc. A copy was also filed with the Clerk of Princeton. Could you call the roll for us, please, Claudia?
Yes, sir. Ms. Chen?
Here.
Mr. Cohen? Ms. Colson?
Here.
Mr. Davidge? Mr. Floyd?
Here.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Here.
Mr. Tenenbaum?
Here.
Mr. Valvanis?
Here.
Thank you.
Good. We have some busy work before we come to the actual cases for the evening. The first of which will be to review two sets of minutes, the first being for March the 28th, 2018. These were circulated in your package. If there are any changes needed, we should make them now. If not, I'd like a motion to accept as presented and a seconder to that motion.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it. I don't care.
We have a second. We can all vote on this, so it's just a roll call vote.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The second set of minutes is from April the 25th. And again, these were circulated to you. If there are any changes needed, we should make them now. If not, a motion to approve is submitted and a seconder to that motion.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a seconder?
Second.
We have a motion and a seconder. So could you call the roll again for us,
Ms.
please,
Chen?
Claudia?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen? I'm sorry. Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Now we have some resolutions to appropriately memorialize. The first one being for 70 Jefferson Road, and this carries the case number Z1818-590. On the copy I got for this, the seconder for the motion wasn't identified, but that's been corrected, and I believe it was Mr. Tenenbaum. Are there any other changes that are required to this memorialization? If not, I would like a motion to approve, and then
Second it.
we have a motion and a seconder. You two again. So our attorney will
I
call the
will.
roll of those eligible to vote.
Ms. Colson,
Yes.
Mr. Schreiber,
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes.
It's approved.
The next such memorialization is Linden Lane, 27 Linden Lane, and that carries the case number Z1818-597. Are there any changes required for this? If not, a motion to approve is presented and a seconder, and then our attorney can call the roll for us.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve. a seconder?
Sure, I can second it. Second it. Yeah.
You're seconding it? Okay.
Actually, Ms. Chen, you didn't vote on the,
Oh, I wasn't voting on that.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's true. You didn't, so you can't.
Okay.
Somebody who heard the case to second the motion? Why don't I do it just for the sake of expediting the process?
all right, then we'll, Ms. Colson,
Yes.
Mr. Schreiber,
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes.
It's approved.
Good. So that's the busy work out of the way, and now we come to the most important thing, which are the applications. And the first of these is 30 McLean Street, which has got the case number Z1515-237. Mr. Bridger, do you want to just
Yes,
read
sir.
the essence of your memorandum?
Mr. Bridger,
And then I'll ask you to make your case.
before we swear you in, I'll note for the record that noticing is in order. The board has jurisdiction to hear the application. And Mr. Bridger, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The applicants, Princeton McLean LLC, the owner and the applicants of 30 McLean Street, are seeking a time extension. They were granted use variance and preliminary and final site plan approval on February 17, 2016, to permit the adaptive reuse of the Masonic Temple and its conversion to a 10-unit apartment building, including 2 co-affordable housing units. The findings of fact and resolution were approved on March 23rd and published on April 22nd, 2016. In accordance with Section 17A 213 of the former Princeton Borough Land Use Ordinance, variances that require obtaining a construction permit shall expire 12 months after the date of granting approval. The Board of Jurisdiction may authorize, for good cause shown, one 12-month extension. The applicant's requesting a 24-month extension due to the complexity of the project and the delays in receiving governmental approvals from the Department of Community Affairs. I'm just going to go through the variances real quickly. They had requested, or they were approved for a floor area ratio variance requirement. Max permitted is 45%. The proposed was 125%. Density, based on habitable rooms, required a lot area of 20,800 square feet. The existing lot area was 7,473 square feet. They were granted numerous bulk variances, one for the number of stories, which is limited to 3, but they're internally expanding the existing 3-story building to 4 stories. Building coverage was a bulk variance requirement is 30%. They were at 34.5%. They received a variance for the number of buildings or units in a building, which is limited to 3, and they are proposing 10. They received a usable open space variance, which requires 200 square feet of open space for each unit, which was 1,300 square feet. However, there was no usable open space on the site. It's basically a fully developed site. There was a parking variance. The requirement's 15. They are proposing 10. They were granted that variance. They were granted a parking stall size variance. The requirement's 9 by 19, and the board granted 8.5 by 18-foot stalls. They were granted light spillage variance. There was a slight light exceeding the 1/10 foot candles at the entrances, and the parking lot lights exceed this level of illumination. And there was a front yard setback to permit the 2 window wells to provide light into the basement. That's a quick synopsis of the case. If you have any questions, I can answer them, and other than that, I'll hand it over to the applicant.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bridger.
Mr. Chairman,
So, sorry,
would it make sense to ask our attorney a quick question at this point in time, or should we hear testimony from the applicant first?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, would it make sense to ask our attorney a question at this time, or would it make sense to hear
You can ask a
testimony?
question of the
Okay.
attorney if you would wish.
Ms. Casey, if in reviewing Mr. Bridger's document, it states specifically that the Board of Jurisdiction may authorize for good cause shown one 12-month extension. Would you kindly please help us understand
Sure.
what good cause means in this scenario?
Well, before I address good cause, I'll explain that what I believe you're going to hear from the applicant is that they are also seeking an extension of their site plan approval. They had preliminary and final site plan approval. The state municipal land use law gives them the ability to request a one-year extension, which I think it's fair to say if the applicant can demonstrate they were delayed through things beyond their control, such as getting third-party agency approvals, they would be entitled to a one-year extension. Different part of the state land use law allows them to request an additional one-year discretionary extension from it. Princeton has a little glitch, which is that it also has the ordinance that the zoning officer reviewed with you, which provides that if you get a variance and it needs a construction permit to implement it, you got 1 year to get the permit. If you don't get it, then you've got to come back and ask for an extension of the variances. In this situation, of course, the site plan and the variances are intertwined, but in terms of good cause, my interpretation would be if the applicant satisfies you with respect to the standard for extending the site plan, i.e., I believe their testimony is going to be the difficulties they've encountered at the State Department of Community Affairs, which delayed them, I would believe that that would constitute good cause because they could not move to pull the permit until they could satisfy getting all the third-party agency approvals. In terms of getting a 2-year extension on the variances, as a practical matter, if the applicant is prepared to pull this permit within the 1-year extension, if you give it to them, then those variances are now, they're not going to expire by virtue of not having a permit. So we have this constriction in the borough ordinance which says you can extend the variances for 1 year. The extension of the site plan protects the applicant from changes in the zoning. So it's not a matter of the site plan being invalid. It's a protection to them that you can't change the zoning or that the town won't rezone McLean Street, and they find, wow, now they can't build because they can't comply. So I don't think these two provisions conflict. I think the applicant may disagree, but I think there's a way to read them that they can work together. So I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did. Okay.
Good. So, please.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Christopher DeGrazia from the law firm of Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, here on behalf of 30 McLean Street, LLC. I don't know, I see a lot of new faces up there, but a few of you may remember approximately 2 years ago, we came in on an application for adaptive reuse of a building that was built in, I think, 1924. It was a Masonic temple, and the applicant was coming in with a plan to essentially take the temple, preserve the outside facade, and make changes in the inside so that it would accommodate a residential use. Even though we got a variance for a 4th floor, we're not adding another floor. It's still within that box. We're just essentially redesigning the inside. It was approved for 10 apartments, 2 of them COA units. It had a lot of neighborhood support. There was a lot of people here supporting the application because they wanted to see the same size and scale and the facade, the historic building preserved. It had a lot of great elements. It was designed for LED. As I said, it had affordable housing. It preserved the historic facade. So there's a lot of really great things about this project. As your attorney indicated, the final site plan approval has a period of protection for 2 years, and essentially your approvals are protected during that period, and an applicant can go in for a mandatory extension based on delay of agency for a year. And then there's also an opportunity to request 3 separate one-year extensions due to complexities, how many units, and a whole bunch of other things that are recognized under the law. So we're here today to request an extension based on delays in outside agency approvals and also based on the complexity of the case. In addition to that request, we are requesting an extension of the variances based on the provision that was read to parallel the site plan. So everything's together because it just makes sense. So whatever that time period is where the protections lapse, we want the variances to lapse during that same time period. And as I said, we are requesting it under two separate sections. One is outside agency approval, and the municipal land use law gives you vested rights in your approvals. When you have a project, it takes a long time to get it together, get your financing, get your meeting the conditions of approval. And if you are delayed because of an outside agency, you're entitled to essentially get an extension for that time period as of right for 12 months. In our particular case, we were actually delayed for 15 months. So in January, so the approvals were in February of 2016. I want to make sure I get all the dates right. The resolution was March 23rd, 2016. In January of 2017, we were ready to go, essentially, in terms of putting together our construction plans and package. Now, they needed to be reviewed and approved by the Department of Community Affairs, and on January 6th, we made a submission and a couple more submissions from January 6th to January 12th, because there was a couple different materials they needed in 2017. So essentially, by January 12, 2017, we had our entire package in to DCA. Over the course of the next 15 months, there was requests and questions. This is not typically a project they see. You know, it's not a large-scale development. It's small. There's a lot of issues with just reviewing an adaptive reuse rather than just knocking down a building and building up. And it took a little longer than expected, and they granted approval on April 26, 2018. So essentially, for a period of 15 months, we were in limbo, just providing information, talking to them. We couldn't do anything. We got the approval just 2 months ago. And so now we're here today asking an extension to preserve our rights to move forward. I think it's only going to take us a few months to get it together, but under the provision, you're allowed to request 12 months for outside agency approval and then discretionary, and that's why we requested both. So we wanted the 12 months that were sort of a mandatory, and then some additional time, because it took us longer than 12 months to actually get through that process, to give us a little more flexibility. But in reality, I think we're going to have this all wrapped up pretty soon. The other basis for the discretionary one is that, as I said, this is a unique project. It's a historic building. You can't just get any contractor. You have to know, you have to have a contractor familiar with adaptive reuse, how to support a structure when you're taking down walls and ceilings. And this particular applicant went through 2 contractors before they found one that was good and able to do this. So there's a specialization with this type of project. It's not, you know, constructing from ground up. It's essentially a very specialized, and you need someone with sensitivities to that. So that's basically it. Again, I want to reemphasize that this was a very important project for the neighborhood. Like I said, they really liked the residential use, less traffic than the original use. They really liked the preserving the historic facade. And it's also an important project for the municipality because there's 2 COA units here. And these COA units are actually part of the municipal plan. So an extension of the rights allows you to fulfill the plan that you have in place that designates 2 COA units for this particular property. So it's an extension will allow the municipality to help fulfill its COA obligation. Applicant has worked in good faith and has used diligent efforts to complete the project. Like I said, up to 2 months ago, we were on hold until we got DCA's approval. Would like to move forward. I have the project architect here, and he's also a principal. He's here, he can answer questions, provide a little bit more details, go into some of the specification of the historic complexities and what's needed to trust the building and how we went through some of the different contractors. He's here to provide that information if you have that, or if you have any questions. And like I said, I think we made a really good effort to move forward, and we're asking for those extensions.
And you're asking for
So the extensions under...
1 year plus?
Yeah, well, it's not actually 1 year from today, because what
Okay.
happens is it
All right.
goes back
So
in
you've got
time
the plus has
to
already
the...
been used?
Yes, so when
Okay.
you're talking about site plan, it would go back to February, so that 1 year would start from February 2018, right?
We actually run it from the date of publication of the findings of fact,
Oh, you do run it from the publication,
yeah.
okay. So what's that, April?
April. It was April. April 22nd, 2016.
Yeah, I was talking about the one, so it would be April 2000.
22nd, April 22nd, 2016, so it would,
Yeah, 2006, so it would be April 22nd, 2000 and, yeah, well, no, we're asking extension to 2020.
sorry, confusing myself. The date of,
No. So let me see if I can do that. It was April, what was the date in April? 2016, April 20,
so 1 year would be 17, so even 2 years.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the extension of the site plan and then asking you to graft on the variance approval. That's why we're off by a year, because you're talking about the variance, which is a 1 year, and I was talking about site plan, which vests for 2, and then a year on that. That's why.
So you want it extended until when? If you don't know, how can we
No,
decide?
absolutely. I think we can do it actually in 1 year from
Which takes us to what date?
April 19th, 2019. Yeah,
2019, in April 2019.
yeah. April, what was the date? Not April?
26th, I think.
22nd. Okay, so we're requesting an extension of the period of protection and all of the related variances to April 22nd, 2019. Correct.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And practically speaking, what does that mean in relation to the building being completed?
Building being,
Completed.
The project being completed. It's not, you're not saying, when you're using the word "it," you don't mean we'll have it finished, I assume.
yes, so the extensions allow us to pull building permits and start construction. And once we start construction, you're vested in the project, and it runs the normal course with building permits usually last a year, and then you can extend them under certain situations. So a different clock takes over at that point. But we're asking for the approval clock, which basically vests at the time we pull permits and start construction. So we're asking until, we want to be able to file and pull permits by April 22nd, 2019.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
It's my understanding that you were granted this on February 17th, 2016, and according to your testimony, if I understand correctly, you submitted the documents 11 months later on January 12th, 2017. that seems like an unusually long period of time when you know that you have a clock running. Is there any reason why it took 11 months to do that?
Yeah, it's not the approved plans, it's construction drawings, which is a whole different level, and it usually takes a lot of time to go through and get those construction drawings. So you have your plan that was before the board, right? You get the approval, and then based on that site plan, you have your plumbing drawings, you have your, all these layers of construction permits that require different drawings than what you already have. So a year is absolutely not unusual or, something that you don't typically see. And also during that time period, you're getting outside agency approvals that may change what the drawings have and show. Your office did the submission, you can address that a little bit as well, but that's not unusual at all. That's actually pretty quick.
Mr. Zender, we just need to
You'll
swear
need
you
to
in.
be sworn in.
Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excuse me. So the period of time for a project such as this is not unusual. We did actually complete the documents probably a month or two before the submission to DCA. Our original intent was actually to submit them to the local building department, and because the typology of the project is such that they should have been able to review it. But because the building is, upon review, technically 4 floors instead of 3 floors, and our building department doesn't have the right certifications for 4-floor buildings, so we had to, as a result of an initial review with the building department, we had to turn around and send it to DCA. And processing the paperwork for DCA, it's an additional level of work. It took another 2 or 3 weeks, and by the time, with the holidays, that time of year, by the time all that was done, we began our submission to DCA on January 6th, and we completed the submission on January 12th.
The next question I have is, do you guys have a signed construction contract? And if so, when does it start and when does it end?
So technically, it's our 3rd construction contract that we have signed, but the first 2 contractors that we were working with, they were overwhelmed by the construction type, specifically the clay terracotta tile that is the exterior enclosure of the building, and they did not feel that they could properly do the work on the building without destabilizing it. The contractor that we currently have does have a contract for the project, and the goal is for us to complete the work in a 9-month period of time after permits are issued, but it's recognized that it might take as much as 12 months.
Okay, so again, when is that supposed to start and when is it supposed to end?
Fingers crossed, in the next month will be, we need this approval, and this is the last element we need in order to be able to submit for building permits. That's really where we are. The contractor, as far as I know, he's prepared all of his documents, his construction folders, and he's ready to submit. There were some state agency letters that were also required. Those have been submitted, and I believe there's a small bond that's required as well, which, if it's not ready, it'll be ready shortly.
So basically, we have everything lined up with the exception of the performance bond, I believe.
And this approval.
And this extension request.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Are there any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this? No. Okay.
Actually, there's just one other. Derek, we don't have people in our buildings that can deal with 4-story buildings? That seems...
It's licensing, it's a technical level of the building inspector, so all the university stuff goes to DCA. Any larger buildings go to DCA. It's not an uncommon thing. And it's not uncommon for people to submit plans to construction and then find out, oh, we can't do them, they go to DCA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we need to discuss it anymore? Seems to me to be a relatively straightforward request. I don't think that they have been lacking in endeavor. And it's something
So again,
important
you
to-
said you believe barring some unforeseen circumstance, that you would be able to complete it in about a year? Is that what I understood?
Well, the goal is to submit to get the permits as soon as we can after this evening, and then to have the project completed as soon as possible. I believe the construction contract calls for a 9-month construction period, with the understanding that construction stuff happens, and so it might take as much as 12 months, but that's the...
And you can extend the construction period if necessary.
Certainly, I mean,
I could tell you
to complete the project is really the
there's
goal.
essentially no one in the room that wants it done quicker than the person right here, who is, as I said, not only the project engineer, but one of the principals, and they want to get it done.
And the building is holding its own without, I mean, it's secured, and I drove by it today. I noticed there was a car in the parking lot, and it just made me wonder what, if it,
Yeah, the building's
going on?
secured, it's locked, it's stabilized. The roof, hasn't been leaking or anything like that. During some of the storms, there was some water infiltration in some of the windows, but that was really overall pretty minor.
you were able to, yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
sure
it's in good shape, it's ready to have the work done. That's really where we are.
Okay, so do we have a motion? We've heard the presentation. We need a motion to approve or disapprove, one way or the other.
I move to approve, but with the 1-year time frame as opposed to the 2-year that's being requested.
With what condition?
In pursuant to our local law that allows for a 1-year extension, so I move to approve for 1 year, not 2.
So
You're
that would
asking
be
for a 2-year
to
extension.
April 22nd, 2019?
That's what I understood, that they had
Yeah.
amended their request
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be.
We
Is that
pulled
correct?
the other year off and said we
Got
would
it.
be fine with April 22nd,
Okay.
2019.
Yeah, so that's an adequate.
Second.
Is there a seconder to the motion?
Second.
Seconder to the motion. Could you call the roll for us, please, Claudia?
Ms. Coulson,
Yes,
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis,
Yes.
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
good.
Appreciate it.
We expect to see good things.
Absolutely.
All right. The next case for the evening is 69 Ferrand Road, and it carries the case number Z1818-18-589. If you would shoo these people away and come and take their chairs, and then I will ask Mr. Bridger to read the essence of his memo into our records, and then ask you to present your case. Mr. Bridger, are you ready? You're
Mr.
still
Bridger,
under
before you
oath?
begin, I'll just note for the record, the noticing is in order, and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Good.
Thank you. Hongzhu Zhao and Helping Zhao, the owners of 69 Ferrand Road, are seeking C1 and C2 variance to approve the location of deck which was constructed without zoning or construction, and approval and exception to the rear yard setback and impervious coverage requirements. Property is located in the Russell Estates Cluster Zone. It's subject to the use and bulk standards in accordance with sections 210B, 253, 255, and 246 of the former Princeton Township Land Use Ordinance. Subject lot is complying with respect to the applicable bulk requirements. The project, or the subject property, is non-complying with respect to the maximum floor area ratio. Maximum permitted is 15, the existing is 25.36. The applicant's property has a 745 square foot deck that was constructed without zoning and building department approval. They are seeking variance relief for that. The deck encroaches into the side yard setback. The requirement setback is 15. The existing is 11.7. and it exceeds the maximum impervious of 29%. The existing and proposed is 32.04%. They are seeking consideration under the C1 and C2 variances. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
The question of impervious coverage, we're saying that the deck represents impervious coverage
It does under the
under the way we write
the way we
it down.
interpret the
Yeah.
stormwater
Okay.
ordinance.
Good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So,
Does the deck, oh, thank you. Is the deck responsible for the extra 10%? Or do you not?
I didn't do the math, but I'm sure it's responsible for 745 square feet of that.
Maybe
But
not.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the,
so would you make your case?
Well, ladies, why don't you identify
You'll need to be
yourselves
sworn
first
in,
for the record?
presumably.
Okay. And my name is Phoebe Lee. I'm a real estate agent. This is Hong Yu Zhao. She's the owner of 69 Ferrand. And yeah, she's applying. When she purchased the house, it doesn't have a approval for the deck, for permit for zoning and construction. So we're applying for the variance for that. Our civil engineer, Frank Falcone, could not be here today, so I'm, helping her translate and say the case.
Okay. So, I think one of the things you should try and explain is why the deck was put up without having a building permit.
It was done by previous owner.
Ms. Lee,
When she-
I'm sorry,
The deck was,
I hate to
Sorry.
interrupt you, Chairman. We should have sworn you in when you began your testimony.
okay.
So I don't know if your client's going to testify, but why don't we have you both raise your right hand?
Okay.
Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening?
Yes, sir.
Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
All right. And question for you, I believe Mr. Falcone's a surveyor, but do you want to carry this application so that he can be with you, or if the board is willing to do that, do you want to try and?
No, she's putting her house on the market, and we already have a purchaser, a buyer.
You mean the 69 Ferrand?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So I tried to do my best I can to answer any questions. I tried helping her out with the applications, and Frank Falcone did the impervious coverage. So,
what I believe you just told me was that the
Yes.
deck was there when the house was
Yes.
purchased.
yes,
So it wasn't constructed by the present owner?
yes.
It was bought
Right,
that
right, by
way. So
previous
it's
owner.
a pre-existing, non-complying
Right.
structure. And you say the house is about to be sold again?
Yes, it was, she put it on for sale in April, and we have a buyer.
And you have
we-
a potential buyer
potential buyer.
who wants the house to be legal,
With the.
so they don't have to
yes,
come to the
Yes,
zoning.
with the deck
Okay.
and permits, yeah.
And, all right. And I guess one of the solutions to the problem would be to make sure that it doesn't violate setbacks, so you could cut something off of the deck if needs be, but you would still have an impervious coverage problem. So I'm not quite sure how we deal with this issue. Can you give us some help, Mr. Bridger?
No, I'm sorry, I can't. There's two choices, obviously approve or deny. I was just going to mention that I did check the impervious. The increase was 771 square feet. The difference between the maximum that you're permitted and where they're at is 771, and the deck is 745. I just wanted to get back to Ms. Coulson. So it's fairly close to the area. The deck is the reason that not the reason, but that's the amount the impervious is over the maximum permitted.
Yeah.
And how impervious is it? Is it a wooden, I mean, I looked at the pictures, is there stone beneath it, or concrete, or?
What Jack is just whispering in my ear, there have been recent changes to the stormwater ordinance, and one of them is, I think it was a year and a half ago, decks were previously considered impervious in the former township.
Okay.
Then, we're looking at strengthening the stormwater ordinance, and we changed the ordinance, or council did, to make them impervious. I mean, just to strengthen up and be more conservative in our impervious coverage, stormwater management ordinance.
So at the time the deck was constructed, it wasn't considered impervious?
Correct. Yeah.
And so if there was never a zoning permit, there was never a building permit either, is that
Right.
correct?
So if you approved it, that would be step one, and they'd have to go back to the construction department and prove that the, footings were done to the correct depth and it's attached to the building, and, the framing's in good shape, so.
So is it a wooden deck with ground beneath it?
Yes.
Stone
Yes,
or mud
yeah.
or just?
And
dirt?
water from the property can flow under the deck.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it can.
So the question of impervious is a dubious one, except formally.
How was it discovered?
I believe the real estate agent realized that, doing her due diligence, and I don't want to provide testimony for her, I think she can speak to that, but that's how it came to our attention, I believe, was through the agent and the owner.
How old is the house?
31 years old? 30. Yeah.
Off the rear of the property, where the deck is located, I'm just looking at the pictures, but they're kind of a bit grainy, and I can see pictures of the deck. It looks like there's a stand of trees in the backyard there. Can you describe
The tree?
how thick the density of the trees is, or how close you are to the property, and any homes that may be behind the property, just visually? Is it?
Right. The trees, there are some large trees in the back, but farther from the deck. That's part of the property, and some of them are part of the Russell estate. Yeah.
Part of it backs up to the part of the open space that was set aside. This was a cluster development, so,
So it backs up to open space, essentially?
yes, sir.
That's Greenway Meadow, actually, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the map of the layout, the intrusion into the rear yard setback is really a very small intrusion. The deck certainly provides usable open space. It's open to the sky. It's not very different from being something at ground level. Not having a permit for its being built, and the issue of impervious coverage is more complex, but from what I would call a technical viewpoint, I very much doubt whether the deck makes any difference to the uptake of water by the piece of property on which it's situated. It appears that water, I don't know what the slope of the local land is there, but it appears that water can run under there. It's an open-sided deck in that sense. And it's an evil that shouldn't be there, but it is. And I guess...
I'm sorry, would you like to take comments from the public first?
Well,
You're kind of setting up
I'm
this-
just making my comments, yes.
Doesn't that come at the end?
But I will ask for comments if you would like. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this case? If so, you can come forward and do so. I don't see anyone who wishes to.
You didn't know that before.
No, I didn't. We've now learned that. Yeah, I was just commenting on my opinion of the site. So, where do we go from here? I think we've learned all we can.
I'm curious,
for-
well, I am curious about something that you just brought up, which is you said it looks like water could flow underneath, and the only picture I can see of the lower part has, has a closure in a way. There's not a, so I don't know whether water can flow, from one side to the other or not. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I have that in my set as well.
Can you address that?
The water below the deck, the ground level,
Is it closed like this on all three sides?
all three sides, it has something to, it's open. The side, the three sides,
Yeah.
it's open.
Well-
The water can flow out from the deck.
Well, it's not on this here.
Just
It's
so,
not here. So I'm just wondering about the other two.
Okay. You're talking about the water from the deck. It doesn't.
it doesn't go down to the ground?
It does go down to the ground.
You're saying that the apron of the
Oh,
deck
yeah.
doesn't go to
all
the
the way to
ground?
the ground.
This
Yeah,
apron
yeah.
here, just
Okay.
right here. See, it's hard to tell from the picture.
Right. And then it doesn't go all the way to the ground and then shrubs, but the water is pitching backward to the back, to the outside, to the weir.
The water would flow away
Yes.
from the...
Yes, and all the gutters has the water extension out, from the.
So the
the
downspouts
downspout
have
that,
got
that flow, yeah. that
a
have the
pipe
pressure
that takes
pipe.
the water from the roof of the house
Right,
away.
that goes, away from the house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to move to closed session?
Sorry?
Are we going to discuss it?
We can go into closed session. I think we've learned all we can. Who has some comments to make?
I mean, they moved to the house and the deck was there.
Yeah.
They didn't construct it. There was no mechanism really in place to discover it, and they happened to discover it and are presenting to us, so that's a good faith gesture, certainly. In weighing the positive and negative criteria for the C2 variance, certainly the negative criteria I would submit are likely met in that I don't think that given the location of the deck to the rear line, the fact that it's screened and it's, open space, it's not really going to strain the purpose and intent of the zoning plan. As it relates to the positive criteria, that's something that I'd like to kind of get the impression of the rest of the board on. But I don't think that there's really in weighing in the balance the proposed deviation, does it outweigh the detriment of telling them to take a circular saw to the deck and cut it off? I mean, I don't think that really makes a whole lot of sense. And I'd be inclined to approve the variance.
So you're making a motion to approve?
Yeah, unless there's anybody who wants
Yeah,
to discuss
well,
it.
now we need a seconder for the motion, and we can discuss.
No. He's making his own statements, and if other people
I
want
thought
to
he
talk,
said he was making
other
a
people
motion.
want to talk, they can talk.
I'm soliciting
Yeah,
opinion.
you're cutting off
if-
discussion again.
He can make a motion anytime he wishes, and if we second it, then we can continue talking. But if you wish
Oh,
to
is that
say
your new rule?
something, you can talk now.
Thank you. I was going to do it.
Sorry?
Let's back off.
No, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I do see some detriment when you have a zoning code and somebody ignores it and builds contrary to the zone and doesn't file for permits. I think that is a detriment to the existing code. I think it sets a bad precedent, which happens sometimes, and we've seen some here. I think I try to look at this, would I approve this if it didn't exist and somebody wanted to build a deck that exceeded to the extent that this does and causes the impervious coverage issue too. And I find that to be a problem. And is there a solution? Yes, the solution is you reduce the deck is one possibility. One solution is to approve the request for a variance. I have trouble seeing the detriment or much of a detriment to the current owner or any owner if you reduce the deck, the code, and regardless of the price, but you're selling $1.5 million home, and it lowers the price by $125,000, and you still have something that no one brought for proper approvals. So essentially, I say, look at it as if it came in right now, it wasn't there, would you approve it?
Does anyone else have any comments?
Did we, forgive me, because maybe I didn't hear this. Do we know when the homeowner purchased this property?
2011?
2011?
Yes,
So this pre-existing condition has been there for at least 6 years?
yes.
Okay. I happen to agree with Mr. Floyd, his position, with the only caveat there that this has now been in existence for 7 years. And I don't feel that it's right to kind of punish the existing homeowner for her purchasing a property that had a previous existing non-compliant condition for a 7-year time frame. So I would second the motion that's on the table.
Actually, I think she said it's been there for 31 years.
Oh, no, the house is
My understanding was the
31
house
years
had been
Oh.
built 30-some odd years
old.
ago.
Yeah,
But the
she
deck
purchased-
is-
The deck, we don't know when it was built.
There was a back door out there, so there's probably a deck whenever it was built. Anyhow, I agree with Mr. Floyd in principle too, but I think the people that should be paying for this are the contractors and not the homeowners who bought it in good faith. And so I would vote in favor of the motion to approve it.
So if I understand it, we have a motion to approve, and Mr. Tannenbaum was seconded to that motion. Is that what we did?
Yes.
Okay. So do we need any further discussion of the motion, or are we ready to vote? I see no need for further discussion. Would you call the roll then, please, Claudia?
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Ms. Coulson,
No.
Mr. Floyd,
No.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Tannenbaum,
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes.
It's approved.
Okay,
It's approved?
it's approved.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Fine, thank you. Our next case is 127 Jefferson Road, which carries the case number Z1818-601. This is for a handicapped accessible ramp, as I understand it. So I'll get Mr. Bridger to read his comments to the board as a matter of record. I assume all of the paperwork is in order.
It is, the board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Mr. Bridger.
Thank you. Steve and Elizabeth Totten are the owners of 127 Jefferson Road, and they are seeking C1 and C2 variance relief to permit the construction of an ADA accessible ramp within the required side yard setbacks. Property is located in the R8 zone, subject to the use and bulk regulation requirements of 10B 253, 255, and 246 of the former Princeton Township Land Use Ordinance. Existing single-family houses permitted as of right. Subject lot is non-complying with respect to the lot area. The requirement's 8,500 square feet. The existing is 4,552. It's non-complying with regard to lot width. The requirement's 50. The existing is 30.35 feet. And it's non-complying with regard to the required 50-foot frontage. The existing is 30.35. And the subject property, the house itself, is non-complying with respect to the right side yard setback. Requirement's 8, the existing is 0. It's attached to another house. There's a lot line down the middle of it. It's non-complying with respect to the combined side yard setback. Requirement's 20, existing's 12.3. We issued a temporary zoning permit in January 2018 to accommodate the applicant's recovery from an illness. The recuperation period's taken longer. The applicants are now needing additional time to have this ramp there, so there is no time limit on the request. So the right side yard setback, the requirement's 8. The variance that they're requesting is 4.3. The combined side yard setback is 20, and the combined would be 12.9. They've requested consideration both under the C1 and the C2. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Berger?
I have one. Did the temporary permit come before this board, or is that something you granted?
We granted it.
Okay. I guess you'll need to be sworn in by our attorney, and then you can make your case.
It's Mr. Stephen Taunton, right? And Mrs. Taunton, do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So my wife was hospitalized after a spinal cord surgery to remove a tumor that left her without use of her legs. And it was our understanding that over time and rehab, she'd slowly regain the use of her legs and ability to walk. And with the time frame, I think we went for a temporary permit. We were optimistic that she would be able to walk around this point. But it's something we didn't have a lot of experience with, and the therapist gave us a rough guess that that was possible. So she was in the rehabilitation hospital, and her insurance cut off at a certain point that we needed to construct a ramp within a pretty short time frame. So we found a contractor who did the permitting for us, and between him and my father, who was an engineer, came up with the idea for this structure being a ramp. And we thought a ramp made the most sense because we were going to have 2 young children at home. She was pregnant at the time, so she was due to give birth soon after we would be home. And we thought for the health of the kids in our house and the kids in the neighborhood that a ramp was probably the best structure. The tough part is that with the height of the stairs at our house, you need a 1:12 ratio, one inch for every inch of rise, you need a foot of length of ramp. So we needed over 50 feet, and it ended up, I think, being about 66 feet. So how to devise that ramp to fit on a plot with a duplex and do it in a way that's not an eyesore for the community, and not, that was the biggest hurdle we were trying to tackle, and we thought we came up with a pretty good plan, with the tough part being with 20 feet of setback required, and we already don't have that much setback, how we do it. And so we put it on the side of a house, so it cut into some of that setback, but there still is more than the 8 feet of setback that's required on the side. It just doesn't get the full setback required, the combined 20 feet. So I guess our argument is that the the positives far outweigh the negatives.
The positive is we don't have to move, pretty much.
We don't have to do humongous construction. We don't, yeah.
There's nothing in the proposed new ordinances to permit handicapped access ramps as of right. I know we've dealt with them in the zoning board on several occasions in history, certainly in the borough.
Well, that's still a work in progress, as you're well aware of. That's a
Yeah.
great idea, that it should be some kind of
think-
accommodation for ADA ramps.
I mean, ideally, every house should be handicapped accessible, ideally.
Yes, sir.
But, yeah.
This
There
is a
is nothing.
temporary ramp? I mean,
We're hopeful
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I mean, it's built
but
out
it's
of
built,
wood.
it's built as a temporary ramp.
it's built out of wood, and we'd be more than willing to take it down, and it'd be a pretty joyous day when we could do that.
Yeah, if I didn't need it.
Do we have any questions?
I think
Anyone have any
the
questions?
C1 speaks to an undersized lot. I believe your lot's undersized, so it's narrower and whatnot, so variances are a little easier to get. You're coming under the C1 variance probably, and it says if you have an undersized lot, exceptional narrowness or whatnot, you get some consideration. I think that probably would be part of your testimony.
I move to approve.
Wait, wait,
Let
wait.
me
just
ask
need-
if there's
yeah.
anyone in the audience
Oh, I'm sorry,
who
excuse
wishes
me.
to address the case. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this case? Seeing none, you can go ahead.
I move to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
And we have a seconder to that motion. Is there any need for further discussion? Would you call the roll then, please, Claudia?
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Yes.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Mr. Tannenbaum,
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis,
Yes.
Chairman Royce.
Yes.
Thank you, it's approved.
Thanks.
You better get skis for the winter.
Thank you.
So, a final case for the evening is 110 Witherspoon Street, the Paul Robeson House, and it carries the case number Z1717-546. I think Mr. Floyd has recused himself. I will also get Mr. Bridger to start the proceedings. I assume all the paperwork is in order, is that correct?
It is, and the
Proper
board
notice
has
has been
jurisdiction
given.
to hear the application.
So, Mr. Bridger, you'll read the essence of your memorandum, and
Yes, sir.
the Historic Preservation Commission is also prepared to make an input? Good. So let's go through in that order.
Okay. Excuse me, the application of 110 Witherspoon Street. It's property of it's the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church of Princeton in New Jersey is the owner, and the Paul Robeson House in New Jersey Nonprofit Corporation is the applicant. They are seeking minor site plan with use and bulk variance to permit renovations to the property at 110 Witherspoon. It's an existing 2.5-story frame building on a 3,200 square foot lot on the northwest corner of Witherspoon and Green Street. It's located in the R4 residential zone. It's also in the John Witherspoon Historic District. Building's currently vacant. A subject property was acquired by the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church in 2005 as a tribute to Paul Robeson and his family. The Paul Robeson House, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, was formed in 2009 with the intent of renovating and improving the property for use as a community resource. The proposed use of the Basement will be to house the Robeson Memorial Gallery, which will have a separate entrance located on Witherspoon Street. A unisex patio room is proposed with the gallery. The balance of the basement will be unfinished storage and include mechanical equipment. First floor will feature a 500 square foot community meeting room, 2 offices and support spaces. Will feature 2 separate entrances, one on Witherspoon and an accessible entrance off Green Street. The second floor will be used for residential purposes to serve those in need of temporary short-term lodging. Second floor will contain 3 bedrooms, or 2 of the bedrooms will have internal bathrooms, and the third bedroom will have access to an adjacent bathroom. The second floor will also contain a common room consisting of a kitchen and a dining room, and the attic will be unoccupied. Additional site work includes a new front porch, which was salvaged from the demolition of a home on Green Street. A new accessible ramp will be constructed under the front porch to provide entry to the gallery, and a proposed covered rear porch with an accessible ramp and an adjoining seat bench will provide access to the rear of the building. 2 new air conditioning condensers are proposed. Bike racks are proposed at the front of the building and also at the rear, and a garbage corral is proposed in the rear yard. Subject property is in the R4 use, and that only permits residential uses. So this use is not a use that falls into that category, so they're seeking a use for variance pursuant to New Jersey SA 40:55D-71, which controls the use of a structure in a district which is restricted against that use. They are also requesting a D4 variance, which is for floor area ratio. The existing FAR of 137%, which is roughly 4,500 square feet, will increase to 153, or that's wrong. Yeah, will increase to 153%. The maximum in this district is 40%. A D4 variance is required. As you're aware, under use variance, no variance or other relief may be granted under the terms of this section unless such variance or such other relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinances. The applicant should provide proof demonstrating the best special reasons. And there's numerous bulk variances, and the reason there are so many is because everything is basically not permitted. So they put a corral up and they do their garbage. It's a variance. I have 27, and there's probably a few more, and that includes signages. But there's a lot of setback variances for the front additions. You got both sides of the front. I'm not going to read each variance because I think they can be admitted into the record. There's a parking variance because there is no standard for this type of mixed-use building in the R4 zone. From a comparative analysis using similar parking standards in the central business zone, which is the zone along Witherspoon and Nassau Street, the various uses would require 13 parking spaces. In accordance with Section 17A 264, when there is not a parking standard, it's up to the Board of Jurisdiction to review the data and come up with its own determination of whether what the applicant proposes is acceptable. In terms of environmental consideration, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but it's a really small lot. Impervious coverage is going to be increased by approximately 600 square feet. Staff has asked the applicant to look at some measures to reduce the proposed impervious. There's not a lot of landscaping on the site. There's limited to a row of shrubs adjacent to the parking stall in the rear of the property, and 1 shade tree is proposed in the courtyard. Staff suggests that the applicant should add 2 tree wells and plant 2 columnar trees on Green Street. Applicant should coordinate that with the municipal arborist. And a solid fence should be added along the northerly and westerly property lines. And landscape beds should be added on each side of the front stairs. A stormwater management plan is required due to the 600 square foot increase. Staff would recommend the applicant utilize porous materials for the driveway and courtyard. There's no change to existing driveway connections. It's staff's opinion that the proposed use will not have significant increase in traffic to the site. The applicant is proposing, as I said earlier, some bike racks. We would request that all sidewalks within the municipal right-of-way be concrete, and we would ask that the existing handicap ramp in the public right-of-way at the intersection of Witherspoon and Green Street be ADA compliant. We are also suggesting or requesting that the overhead utilities for electric, gas, or electric and phone and cable be installed underground. In terms of advertising features, they are proposing, I believe, 4 signs. And again, these are all variances because they're really not, their business uses aren't permitted in that zone. So a lot of these, there's a gallery sign for the gallery, which is 2.33 square feet. There's a Robeson sign to identify the building. That's, again, 2.33. And then there's private and public entrance signs, which are 1.25 foot each. There's an existing 3 square foot historic plaque that will be located to the front porch. We would ask that the applicant post a performance guarantee for all the improvements within the municipal right-of-way. The applicant's engineer should provide a bond estimate to be reviewed by the municipal engineer. A second estimate, including on-site improvements, must be submitted to determine inspection fee costs. The existing easement with the municipality for the encroachment of the existing building into the right-of-way on Green Street must be modified to accommodate the proposed rear porch and steps, or any encroachments into that. There's an extension of the rear porch which continues that encroachment. And we would ask that details for the concrete sidewalk and the ADA ramp be submitted. That's a brief synopsis of the application. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? Thank you. So
Hand it over to
now
Elizabeth.
we hear from the Historic
Kim.
Preservation Commission. Is that right?
Thank you.
Ms. Kim, we better swear you in. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Before reading the HPC Chair's memo, I would like to provide a little background on the Witherspoon Jackson Historic District, which this property falls into. I believe that this is probably one of the first applications that has come before HPC as they served as courtesy to the zoning board. So if you could just allow me to spend a little time to inform you about this. The application proposes improvements on the property referred to as the Paul Robeson House. The neighborhood in which this property lies was included in the amended May 15, 1997 Princeton Community Master Plan under suggested historic sites and districts for the former Princeton Borough and was identified as the Witherspoon John Street Historic District. In the master plan, 6 properties were listed as representative historic sites for this recommended district. One was the Dorothea House, which is an Italian settlement house. The second was the former Witherspoon Street School for Colored Children on Quarry Street. The third was a Witherspoon Street Church, which was constructed as the first Presbyterian church of color of Princeton. The fourth was the African Methodist Episcopal Mount Pisgah Church on Witherspoon Street. The fifth was the Douglas Hall, which is located on Witherspoon Street, once used as a segregated school, lecture hall, and YMCA, and a school Paul Robeson attended. And the sixth, of course, is 110 Witherspoon Street, the former Witherspoon Street church manse and birthplace and childhood home to Paul Robeson. Shortly after the consolidation of the 2 Princeton municipalities, the Historic Preservation Office and the Historic Preservation Commission were charged to determine if this neighborhood was warranted to become a local historic district or not. The commission hired Weiss Preservation Planning to execute the research and make a determination according to their findings. The consultant concluded this neighborhood with over 300 properties possessed the architectural and historic significance and is worthy of preservation as outlined in the municipal ordinance. The study found the neighborhood to be cohesive and an intact expression of Princeton's largest African-American community, whose appearance and setting is a result of years of social, economic, and educational disparity brought about by discrimination and segregation. The buildings and streetscape tell its story. The dense development, vernacular architecture, and associated religious, social, and commercial buildings make evident the incredible history that occurred here. The neighborhood was also known for the Italian and Irish immigrants who came to Princeton, and more recent, the Italian community.
the Latin community, excuse me. It has always been a neighborhood that was open to those with lesser financial means and often used as a springboard after gaining financial stability. The HPC unanimously concurred with the consultant's findings, therefore recommended the designation of this new district. And in 2016, this neighborhood was designated the 20th Princeton Historic District and named the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District. So with that said, the Commission was eager to review this application when it came before them. The Historic Preservation Officer's report of May 18, 2018 revised, which I understand was included in the board's agenda package, provides the history of the property and information about Paul Leroy Robeson and some information on his father, Reverend Drew Robeson, which gives context to the significance of this property in this historic district and neighborhood. So to move on to the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission's Chair report of June 14, 2018, the Paul Robeson House, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, hereinafter referred to as the applicant, has filed a minor site plan with use and bulk variances application with your board. The subject property has an address of 110 Witherspoon Street and is identified as Block 17.02, Lot 55 on the Princeton tax map, here when referred to as property. At the property, the applicant intends to repair the failing foundation, to replace the existing siding with materials similar to its original siding, to install a new mechanical system, to provide barrier-free access to portions of the building, and change the residential use to a mixed-use building. The property is located within the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District and the New Jersey National Register of Historic Places Princeton Historic District. As such, the applicant appears before the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission, herewith referred to as HPC, to review the application at its meeting on May 21, 2018. HPC serves as advisory to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for this application. The property is comprised of 2,295 square feet of land and is situated on the corner of Witherspoon and Green Streets. As noted on the Princeton Historic Buildings Resource Paul Robeson House property inventory sheets, the building on the property is classified as key contributing to this district. The house was built circa 1842 with a front porch. The existing building consists of a wood frame structure, 2.5 stories, with a stucco foundation. The property has a double-pitched cross-gable roof with thick molded eaves. The roof has asphalt shingles, the eaves are clad in vinyl, and the exterior is clad in aluminum siding. There are 4 bays facing onto the Witherspoon Street elevation with an attic window on a centered cross gable. The windows at the property are generally 1/1, double-hung, sash replacements, except in the rear, where the majority of the windows are 2/2. The front door of the structure has already been replaced. The property has a 2-story, 2-part addition with a shed roof in the rear. The property also has concrete walkways, a gated gate, and driveway in the rear yard. The rear elevation has a back door with Bilco doors to its left. There is evidence of many alterations that have occurred to the back of the house. One window in the rear was most likely removed and other windows likely altered in size and in location. The front of the house was built half a story above grade, which allowed for an entrance near the northeast corner of the building. Somewhere between 1895 and 1902, the building was first observed having 2 separate addresses. The basement with the corner entrance was once used for African Americans who worked at Princeton University, serves as the colored YMCA, and was Mr. David Graham's barbershop. This entrance door has subsequently been converted into a window. There is a concrete walkway from the public sidewalk along Witherspoon Street that access the front steps, which are brick with bluestone treads and metal handrails. The property has concrete planters and a raised wall with ground cover and plantings in the front yard. The structure, as Mr. Bridger said, is currently vacant. The applicant intends to renovate and make improvements to the property so that the ground floor can house the Robeson Memorial Gallery, which will tell the story of the Robeson family, the Witherspoon Street Church, and the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. It will have its own entrance, as it had when it served as a neighborhood barbershop. a few offices, and a meeting room to convene community functions, cultural and educational talks, and social gatherings for causes of social injustice will utilize the first floor. The second floor is intended for short-term temporary lodging, especially for African American youth and first-generation immigrants, scholars, teachers, and missionaries. The attic has 3 tiny bedrooms currently and will remain largely unchanged from when they rented to service workers during its rooming house years. This space will only be accessible during guided tours of the property. Access to the first floor will be through the main entrance on Witherspoon Street. Accessible barrier-free ramps are planned for the ground floor gallery for the first floor through a rear entrance. The HPC expressed enthusiasm for the application, which will provide a meaningful resource for the neighborhood and community. However, there were concerns related to the appropriateness of reusing the enclosed salvaged porch retained from the property at 12 Green Street, the mural on the building's elevation facing Green Street, and the elimination of the green strips between the curb and public right-of-way. HBC concluded that the proposal to add the salvaged enclosed porch should be modified to provide for construction of a simpler porch with columns and railings instead. HBC also concluded that the proposed Green Street elevation should be modified to eliminate the proposed mural and retain the original character of the elevation. HBC suggested that the applicant consider the new courtyard as an alternate location for a mural. Following the review of the plans, hearing testimony, and after deliberating, the Commission unanimously endorsed the application for the approval. The Commission recommends that if the application is approved, that your board considers the following recommendations. One is the proposed installation of the salvaged enclosed porch for the 12 Green Street property should be omitted from the plans and constructed as a simple porch with columns, railings, and no brick lintels. 4 columns from the salvaged Green Street porch are acceptable to be reused for the new porch to support the roof. New railings are preferred to be constructed of wood and painted white. Number 2, on the Witherspoon Street elevation, the upper horizontal band of brick will be replaced with boral fascia. The lower band of brick under the bench shall be removed, and the opening under the north side of the porch shall be eliminated. Number 3, the chimney shall be removed. 4, all grass strips in the right-of-way shall remain as vegetated ground cover to retain the neighborhood character and streetscape. 5, the mural shall be omitted from the plans. 6, the driveway opening location shall be retained to preserve the adjacent street tree. 7, the existing bronze plaque shall be relocated to the Witherspoon Green Street building corner under the lettering of the new sign gallery. 8, the trash enclosure shall be installed with doors. I apologize, that's missing on that. 9, the bench depth in the courtyard shall be increased to 20 inches. 10, the cedar in the courtyard shall receive a clear varnish finish. 11, the new light fixture shall have a bronze, dark brown, or Tuscan tan finish. 12, LED lighting shall be provided in a warm spectrum. 13, public sidewalks shall be concrete. 14, HBC supports adding 2 trees along Green Street and a fence along the western edge of the property, but not a fence along the northern side as recommended in the engineering zoning report of May 18, 2018. And that came about from actually the presentation by the applicant when they talked about the church's property on that adjacent side. 15, HPC supports the widened rear porch design that allows for the inclusion of steps to access the new porch. And the last one is the applicant shall return to the appointed HBC subcommittee, which consisted of appointed members Robert von Zumbush, Richard Chenoweth, and Tom White, to finalize any of the outstanding items for the Historic Preservation Commission application above conditions noted, and including details and material related to the building, porch, railing, signage, relocated, and murals. And the HBC appreciates the opportunity to share their comments and recommendations for consideration by your board for this application.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions at this point? So, I believe it's your turn now.
Good evening. My name is Dan Haggerty. I'm representing the Paul Robeson House, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, in this application that comes before you this evening. We have 3 witnesses. who we're going to present this evening. First one is Ben Colbert. He'll come up in just a minute. Ben is the president of the nonprofit corporation, and he also is a long-standing member of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church of Princeton. The Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church is the owner of this property, but of course the nonprofit corporation, the Paul Robeson House, is the applicant here this evening. Our second witness is going to be Kevin Wilkes. I was going to put this back. Our second witness is going to be Kevin Wilkes. Kevin is an architect. He also is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Paul Robeson House. He also is the owner of Princeton Design Group, which is the contractor that will be performing the renovation and improvement work. Our third witness is going to be Wayne Ingram, who's right here. Wayne is our project engineer. He's also a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. So with all the good background information that we've had, let's get right to it with, I felt like Chris Como, let's get right to it with Ben Colbert. Ben? You come right here.
Come and sit in the front.
Sit right there. I'm going to sit down too. You talk right in that microphone.
Thank you.
Mr. Haggerty, we need to swear in your witness. Sir, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, what we've done in order to make this as concise as we can, Mr. Colbert has prepared a brief statement in which he's going to explain who we are, what we're about, and what this project is about. Mr. Colbert, it's all yours.
Thank you. I am Ben Colbert. I live at 137 Lawrenceville-Pennington Road in Lawrenceville. I am, however, a former resident and homeowner in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. I'm an active member of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church and president of the Paul Robeson House of Princeton's Board and Advisory Committee. The house, located at the corner of Green and Witherspoon Streets, has been part of the Princeton streetscape for over 140 years. It was the church manse when the Reverend William Drew Robeson served as minister at the First Presbyterian Church of Color in 1879 to 1901. His youngest son, Paul, the renowned international concert, film, and stage performer and civil rights activist, was born there on April 9th, 1889.
1898.
1898. I'm dyslexic. The house was lost to taxes after, but later purchased by the Ellerby family, who operated a rooming house and a barbershop and other commercial ventures, and it served as a gathering place for people who were not allowed access to the nearby business district and commercial areas. In 2005, the Witherspoon Church repurchased the house and designated it as a memorial to the life of Paul Robeson and his illustrious career and his assertive commitment to civil rights, equal justice, and service to the poor and underserved worldwide. In 2009, we formed an independent nonprofit 501c3 organization. This group of volunteers is charged with the planning and implementation of program initiatives and fundraising. In 2015, the Board of Advisors, with broad support from the community and our faith-based partners, we were able to retire the original mortgage after raising nearly $500,000. We're now planning to launch a fundraising campaign to rehabilitate the house for use as a community resource, open and available for social and cultural events, meetings, office space, exhibit space, temporary lodging for people in need and those seeking employment, visiting scholars and students, and in keeping with the Robeson tradition, advocates for fairness, diversity, and social justice for all. Please note, and you've heard, this is a rehabilitation project, not a tear down. We take very seriously our key location at the gateway of the designated Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District. We are proud and honored to honor this very important native son and the opportunity to establish a permanent tribute to people who have contributed much to Princeton, the Princeton we all know and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colbert, who was available to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions? I think you should continue with your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you can go back. I'm going to, Kevin, I'm going to give you this. I'll give you this one. I'm going to use this one. Otherwise, Jack will get nervous. Mr. Wilkes, if you would raise your right hand to be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do, Karen.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilkes, what is your profession or your occupation?
I'm an architect and a builder.
Would you please, well, let's deal with the architect right now.
Oh.
Would you please tell the board briefly about your education, your work experience, and your professional licensure?
You have appeared before the board.
Yes, sir, I have.
Yes.
He likes to say this stuff. Would you accept him as an expert in the area of
I
architecture?
think we'll accept him as we did previously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Now, Mr. Wilkes, you are an architect. You also are the owner of Princeton Design Group. Is that correct?
Princeton Design Guild. Yes, sir.
Guild, and you have started,
Always advertising.
and you have designed the plans, the architectural plans that we're going to go over this evening, and you are going to be the builder who completes this renovation project, assuming that it gets approved and obtains all the permits that it needs.
Yes, sir, that's true.
You're also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Paul Robeson House, the nonprofit corporation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, with the good background information that's been provided by Mr. Bridger and Ms. Kim, let's get right to the plans.
Fine.
Okay?
They did a great job. The house is about 176 years old, and it's undergone at least 6 addition campaigns, additional construction in its history, at least 3 complete interior remodelings that I can figure out, and maybe 2 remakings of its exterior skin. So it's been a challenge for us to establish, and we worked this out with Historic, what were the original conditions and sizes of the building. It's one of the largest homes in the neighborhood. When it was a rooming house, it had 10 bedrooms in it. So through much of this middle of the 20th century, it was used as a rooming house. We plan to change it to a mixed-use building that will retain some residential use, but have a business, a nonprofit use, on the ground floor and on the first floor. So largely the use variance that we're requesting to convert a single-family home to a mixed-use building drives most of the variance requests that we have to pull this off. We are not changing the footprint nor the size of the existing home, the existing building. We're essentially repairing it. The building structure is significantly rotted through years of water penetration. There are 4 layers of skin on the building. The original siding stucco, asphalt shingles, and then aluminum siding. The windows that are presently there are replacement windows, and they've been moved around dramatically. So, candidly, we want to give the building a reconstruction for its next 100 years. And what we want to do is make part of the building available to the public. In the past, the ground floor had been available to the public. It had been used as a private meeting space, as Elizabeth mentioned, for the porters that worked on Prospect Avenue at Princeton University after eating club parties. It was also used as a barber shop. So the corner entry was a common condition in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, where African Americans had to have their own businesses in their own neighborhood because they couldn't use or shop on Nassau Street businesses. So a common piece of the typology was the ground floor of a corner building had a public or commercial use. So we actually want to take that space and turn that into a gallery. And we want to open that so the public can come. So we will restore the steps, but we're also going to install an accessible ramp to make this fully available to the public, and an accessible bathroom inside that gallery for public accommodation and improvement of public health. The first floor, above grade, we're going to make into a meeting room. And maybe what I should do, can you see these plans from up there? You have them in front of you, actually.
If you could move it out to where the other
Sure,
one is,
Beck.
that would be good.
Mr. Haggerty, do you want to make all these exhibits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, why don't we do that, Ms.
Okay.
Casey? So that as we go through, we'll mark them sequentially, okay, Kevin? So please
This is
describe
titled-
verbally what this is.
This sheet A100 is the proposed ground floor plan.
We'll mark this as Exhibit A1.
Is that any better for the members of the board? Oh, cool, thank you. Did I write A1 on here?
I wrote it
Oh, you
on.
did? Okay. So the ground floor, you'll enter from the corner of Green and Witherspoon, do 3 steps down into the gallery space, which is the space adjacent to Green Street. You really can't see, can you? All right, so you know what's coming. And there'll be a ramp underneath our porch, so it's covered, protected from ice and snow and rain. And the gallery is about 280 square feet. And this gallery will be programmed independently of the rest of the building, and it will have exhibits that relate to the Robeson family, exhibits that relate to the history of Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and also exhibits that tell the history of the neighborhood itself, which is really quite remarkable. The rest of the basement will be used for mechanical equipment, some storage, a laundry room for the people who live on the second floor, and there'll be a rear entrance through the Bilco doors. This is exactly the same footprint. There's no enlargement of the footprint of the building. We do need to rebuild the Green Street foundation wall. It's buckled. It's leaning out into Green Street. So we will do significant reconstruction on this wall in the course of construction.
Maybe we should note now, it literally is in Green Street. That property, that edge of the building encroaches by almost 3 feet into the Green Street right-of-way, and there is an easement, an encroachment easement. It was granted by the former borough. We'll be talking about that again in a few minutes when we talk about the rear porch and the steps for the rear porch.
Maybe we want to call... All right, this is A101. So
This this would be Exhibit A2. Could you please verbally describe what Exhibit A2 is?
A2 is the proposed first floor plan. So this is the plan that's about 4.5 feet above sidewalk level, the first main floor above grade on the existing building. The present plan today, entry hall, stairs upstairs, bedroom, rear hall, bathroom. In the back on the first floor today is kitchen, pantry, dining room, and living room. A fairly typical residential plan with 2 bedrooms on the ground floor. Our proposal is to separate the entrances for the residential side and the business side, both for practical and fire code reasons. We can't have a residential use access through a business use. And so we're going to move the staircase to the back corner of the building where the present bathrooms are and create a rear entrance for the residential floor of the building, which will be the floor above this, and retain the front entrance here with the modification of the addition of a porch, covered porch, keep a set of stairs coming up, similar to the brick stairs we have today, into a meeting room that's about 500 square feet, which is effectively the living room and dining room, with this center wall taken out. The area that's the kitchen in the back will become a rear entry, so there are 2 ways in and out of the first floor. We'll have 2 bathrooms, entry vestibule, and a small little serving bar kitchenette with a little sink and under-counter fridge for refreshments. Then off to the side of the meeting room will be 2 offices that effectively take the location of the 2 bedrooms and a bit of that stair that was removed. And these 2 offices will be not accessed outside, but through the meeting room, and these will be used for nonprofit groups that have similar social justice concerns that we have in our use. And then on the very back corner, as I said, there's an entrance, a set of stairs coming up off of Green Street, and the ramp that gets an accessible entrance into our first floor level. So as you discussed on your previous application, since we're about 4 feet and change above sidewalk grade, we have a 48-foot long ramp. So we bent it in a way to create a courtyard and create a public space outside in our what was backyard, and the ramp moves up the rear to come into this level. So the rear entry is shared with a new covered porch on the back of the building. So both entrances are covered and protected from rain and snow. And then why don't we look at the floor plan above, which is the second floor, which is sheet A102.
This will be Exhibit A3.
So we had 2 bedrooms down on the first floor. We have 5 bedrooms on the second floor presently, and 2 bathrooms in the present house, so that gets us up to 7 so far. And in our proposed plan, we're going to have 3 bedrooms and make 2 bathrooms en suite to those bedrooms. So the one along Green Street has internal bathroom. The one along Witherspoon Street has an internal bathroom. And the back bedroom will have a sink, a lavatory, but actually use the hall bath, which doubles as a powder room, and then has a door into a shower or tub enclosure. I come up the rear stairs into the modest public space, which is really just a dining kitchen area, and that's shared by the people who would reside in those 3 bedrooms. There's a little staircase existing. It really isn't a staircase, it's a ladder that takes you to the attic, and you climb up this ladder to get to the 3rd floor, the attic. And Karen, that's A103, which you...
And will be marked as Exhibit A4.
This attic exists today, has 3 more bedrooms. It gets us up to the 10 bedrooms that we have in the house. And this attic is largely intact, except in poor shape, from how it was used in the mid-20th century. In fact, hanging on this wall right here is the telephone contact list for the 1962 class of Princeton High School. One of those old purple mimeograph sheets, so the top sheet's faded completely, but when you lift it up, you can actually read numbers. And Gladys Taylor's son, Ronald, was on that list, so possibly this was Ronald's bedroom. We plan to basically leave these spaces intact as an example of what a mid-20th century rooming house in a fairly minimal state of enjoyment would be like. It's a fiercely hot attic. So we're just going to essentially clean it up, reattach the sheetrock that's fallen down, and we're going to leave the ladder. There's no reasonable way to make it a code-compliant floor. We'd have to put a ridiculous staircase in there and butcher the space. So we're just going to fix it up, seal it off, and keep it for private guided tours, for special occasions when people want to see that, and we do not plan to occupy it, nor do we plan to put any furniture or exhibits or anything there. It will just be a memory palace of history of 20th century laborers who lived there.
You said it was sheetrock, not cloth and plaster?
It's a very early phase of sheetrock. So the building underwent a significant reworking in, I believe, the late 60s, that's when I think the aluminum siding and the replacement windows happened. And they put the early sheetrock that has the New York City code numbers on it. So if I wanted to do a little history of sheetrock, I could make a cool little exhibit. But I'm just going to try to leave it with a very light touch. There was a blown-in cellulose insulation that's kind of fallen down. I need to rebuild the roof. So there'll be some delicate maneuvers. We're actually going to put a tent over this, open the top side of the roof, reattach it, insulate from the outside, reinstall the roof, put a new roof on. It's, maybe a little overly arduous way of doing it, but the attempt is to try to restore and keep the skin materials. 60% is still on the wall and 40% is lying on the floor. So that's what's happening inside the building, what we propose. We'll really end up with 1 meeting room, 2 offices, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms on the living level, and a gallery in the ground floor, and 2 bathrooms on the meeting room, 2 bathrooms, not a full bath. So those are the plans that we propose.
Chairman Royce, can I ask a question now?
Yes, if you wish.
I have a question about the second floor.
Oh, yes.
It looks like the kitchenette area has no window or other natural light, or can you talk about that? Is that anything? I assume that's not anything that we have to worry about from a...
I'm sorry, repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
On the second floor, the
Yeah.
kitchenette area, I don't see a window or other way of there being natural light, or how is that lit? Is that a problem?
So
in any way?
I actually do need a window over that sink. I need to have some fresh air in that room. And so thank you for catching that. Unfortunately, the adjacent building wall is 4.5 feet away, but we do need fresh air for that room. This is A200 elevations. So this is the existing Witherspoon Street elevation today, proposed Witherspoon. So these are going to be a little different. I don't know which version of the drawings. Did they get the version after we made the historic corrections, or do you still have?
Revision 3.
I think we have the one you wrote there.
That's this section. The section didn't change, but let's just look right above the elevation.
27th, revision 3. June 27th,
Okay.
revision 3.
Okay, good. So those are post-historic preservation review commissions. So these are, shall we call them, the corrected or revised elevations that show the porch simply with a set of columns that were salvaged from a house that was demolished across the street. And new brick steps, but of similar character. The window fenestration is largely the same as it exists today. There's a slight change to the big plate glass window, picture window in the existing living room. We're turning that into 3 double hungs. But I think maybe it might be a little easier to see this rendering. So that's,
Exhibit A6, and just verbally describe what it is.
and this is sheet A300. It's a rendering looking from the Green Street, Witherspoon Street corner at the southeast corner of the building. So here will be the steps up to the first floor. The ramp to the gallery moves underneath the porch floor, down through here. The porch is open, it just has railings, open railings across it. On the corner, we proposed signage, both the existing bronze plaque, which today is up on the first floor by the door going into the building. We proposed to move it down onto this corner and put the name Robeson Gallery here on the corner. These 2 windows are the 2 windows that are in place today, although they're going to get rebuilt when I rebuild this whole wall, but we propose to keep that size of window in place. These are the signs. This is E100, and this has the proposed signs we're looking to install on the building. So really we want to put the name of the building, Robeson Gallery, on the corner as we show.
Individual letters through?
Yes, individual raised stainless letters set outside the stucco surface.
Yeah.
So they'll be proud, a little space behind them. This is the plaque that we'll put underneath that, the existing bronze plaque. And then on the back of the building, we propose
This is Exhibit A8. Could you please describe what it is?
This is sheet A304, and this is a rendering from down Green Street by the driveway going into our project, and that shows a view into a courtyard we're proposing. And the 2 signs, public and private, over the 2 doors will distinguish the door that goes into the apartments, or the apartment, and the door that goes into the public room. So the idea behind our courtyard in the backside of the house is to create a public space, really, a space that's contiguous with the sidewalk, that's open to the sidewalk. It faces Green Street. It has bench on 3 sides, has a tree planted in the middle, and there would be steps from this courtyard up to the level where you enter either the stair hall up to the apartment or the meeting room. And the courtyard is surrounded by the accessible ramp on 3 sides that gets you up to that height, but the ramp is disguised from the street by the device of the courtyard walls. And the courtyard is intended to be a convening meeting space. So one of our board members leads tours of the neighborhood, and this is a space where those tours can start. People can convene and meet and listen to the history of the Robeson House and become a launching point to continue the walking tour of the neighborhood and to end the tour. And when events happen in the house itself, whether they relate to the gallery downstairs or relate to the public meeting level, there's an outside public space that can be part of the meeting area. So we imagine really an opening, and it faces the Arts Council. The Arts Council has some public space along its outside wall. So really, we're trying to make a little dialogue between the outside public space of those two buildings.
Mr. Wilkes, this might be a good time to talk about those steps
Okay.
on the rear porch and what happens if the existing encroachment easement were not to be amended.
Okay. If I go back to Exhibit A2, which is the first floor plan. So when we started on this project a few years ago, Wayne Ingram and I figured out that the building seemed a little larger than the lot. Things didn't line up, and we figured out that the building was built 3 feet over into the public right-of-way on Green Street, that back in the day, no one really paid attention to lot lines. And this had existed, we see it well back into the 1880s. We can't tell you when. I think there was a porch on that side of the building because when you peel back the flooring on the second floor, the floor is sloped and there's a porch roof there. But be that as it may, this dashed line here indicates the property line. So there's 3 feet, about 92 and a half square feet of this building exists on public right-of-way on Green Street. We petitioned to get an easement from Princeton Borough to sort of acknowledge the condition. Princeton Borough, back in the day, granted that.
In 2012.
2012. And there exists a garden wall, an outside space here, which we weren't clever enough to write in the easement. We just wrote the footprint of the enclosed building. And now, as we've thought through our design and realized we need a rear entry condition, we want to have both the ramp and a set of steps come up and both arrive at the covered porch, so everyone enters and exits in the same condition under this roof. But what that means is these piece of steps here and the porch roof sitting over this are new encroachments into that easement, and we will have to go back to council, mayor and council, and ask to have the easement expanded by 24 feet to accommodate this. If we can't...
25 square feet.
Excuse me, 25 square feet. If we can't pull that off, we do have an alternative design, which is shown here on this corner. We would pull this piece back, and it would cause us to eliminate the stairs and only have the ramp coming up onto this porch because we lose 2.5 feet on this edge. So we have a proposed alternate, and obviously historic preservation in their recommendations recommended that we be granted this. Obviously, there are many steps to pull that off, but that's why we have two alternative conditions here for that.
Before we leave the ramp, Mr. Ingram will review the stormwater management proposals that we have. But one thing that I know we are going to propose, it was suggested, is that the ramp be of a material that is pervious. Could you address that?
Yes, we've received some assistance from the Watershed Institute, and they've shown us some interesting stormwater management strategies whereby they actually make ramp materials now that are both ADA compliant and porous and would allow water to drain through them and be collected underneath and used in a system that would actually water the roots of this tree. So we haven't really figured out all the details. This exists as a concept right now, but Wayne will speak to the fact that we're certainly willing to accept the recommendation of porous pavers in the courtyard itself, but we also might be able to turn the ramp into something that lets rainwater run through, still be accessible, and we can collect that And then there's a system that they've shown us of a series of watering cells that will take that water and use it to make that tree take off.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Or is that?
Yeah.
Kevin, excuse me, Mr. Wilkes.
Kevin's fine.
Can you please address the residential area?
Sure.
It's my understanding that if children are to be housed, even on a temporary basis, adequate security measures need to be in place so that they're not sharing bedrooms?
There are not children.
So there would not be any children. Is that the testimony that's being presented this evening?
Yes.
The young adults was the terminology that we should have used. I think the thinking was that there could be somebody just transitioning from school to full-time employment and might need some temporary lodging, but not minors. Ben, come on back. Let's make sure we get this right.
Well, we have in the past had a case, so let me explain that, and we can see how that would fit. We had an immigrant family, I believe from Ethiopia. Is that correct? A husband and wife and children. They occupied the house themselves, and there were no other people. There have been times when there were unrelated residents of the house living there, myself included. So I do believe it might be possible that on that second floor, one family could occupy that entire 3 bedrooms on a short-term basis and not have other residents in other bedrooms unrelated. That would obviously require programming ability that everything is empty. But in all fairness, we have had one time there a family that was transitioning immigrants to America and actually finally found housing in Princeton, and this was a space for them to kind of get their feet on the ground.
But it's not going to be a licensed child care facility.
But regardless, my understanding of Division Youth and Family Services requires that a child cannot share a bedroom with another child that's a stranger or an adult. I mean, I think what y'all are doing is fabulous, and your design is excellent, Kevin, as always. The concern, though, is safety. And if we're putting children in there, then I think I didn't hear anybody address that, which is why I'm raising the question.
No, we have that concern, and
we have had some experience as well, as pointed out. But most of the residents there are likely not to be complete or families. It may be a child waiting for a child and parent. But we're not expecting to have intact families, for instance.
Who will be responsible for coordinating who's there and making sure the building is, and the community and the people in the building are all safe, I guess, is the question.
We, as the overseers and managers of the project, will have specific issues relating to the availability of the 3 bedrooms, who gets priority in terms of the residents and the use of the building, and therefore use that as a measure of control, if you will. It isn't a plan where you just sort of show up and say, I need temporary housing. There will be reviews. And in fact, I share a membership on the Princeton Community Housing Board, which does have guidelines as well that would be subject to your review.
But we'd certainly be very careful to make sure that whatever the legal requirements are satisfied. Is that correct,
yes.
Mr. Colbert?
Mr. Haggerty, are you anticipating that they would be registered then with the rental housing office? I don't know if the town would require that, but is that something that...
I don't know either, but if it was required, it would be done.
Okay.
The challenge here that we're trying to conceive is to provide a type of housing for which we see very little of in our community, which would be an emergency short-term transition need for someone that had to, maybe a battered woman and her child who had to get out of her house that night. We expect that they will be recommended to us by another social group or a church or somebody that has understands their situation. We're not going to just hang up a sign on the door and say, give us a call.
I mean, I see it as a huge responsibility that you're taking on in addition to everything else. You know, it's like, I don't bring it up as a criticism. I bring it up
we understand that, but we're trying to provide
And maybe there are
for
other-
public good something that we see a need for, and candidly, you know, it's not the easy kind of thing to, you know, a landlord would want to set up. But, you know, we believe we have a special purpose here. We have a special building. The building's been ennobled by an incredibly special family, the Robeson family, and we want to carry on that legacy by doing good work in the name of public good. And sometimes that requires more effort, and, you know, we understand there'll be complications and challenges, but we're up for the task.
Are you done with your presentation? Because I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
I could be done.
We have to do the variance.
Yes. So the answer is, sir, is not quite yet. But you know, I can go on and on and on
Why
and
don't
on.
you finish describing the features of the building that are
Okay.
important from a zoning viewpoint? Presumably the front porch will be one of those things. There it is.
What are we up to, count A9?
A9 will be drawing A302. This is another view from the north on Witherspoon Street, looking at the front of the building. So this is the porch. You see the openings here and under between the brick piers. So we have benches that face the street. This is a pretty high traffic corner. A lot of people walk up and down there. I originally proposed a harder streetscape paving to the curb line because all of the green strip is beaten down by pedestrian and bicycle traffic. Historic Preservation felt that was not a good idea because they want to retain the original residential character of the neighborhood, so I understand that. But that being said, numerous people sit on our steps and gentlemen talk on their cell phones and kids hang out, and so we're actually trying to create a little bit of space here with the bench on both sides of our steps to, you know, I don't want to call it street furniture, it's an architectural device, but people will be able to sit across here and chat and hang out. But these are open to the space below, which has the ramp underneath it, and then the porch goes from here to here, although the roof is symmetrically disposed across the building around the center line of the gable. This end is actually covering the ramp and steps that's heading into the downstairs gallery. And actually, this drawing shows a view. We look right through the porch. And this is drawing A301. So here you can see it. There's really a double height space. Here is where people walk under, and then here's where people walk above. So all of the FAR increase in this project relates to this porch, the ramps, the fact that we now call this floor area ratio double height space counts double. So we're not increasing the footprint of the building at all. We're not increasing the cubic volume of the building at all, but we are adding these devices which are driving both our coverage and our FAR up. How's that for a segue into variances?
The existing FAR is 137%, 4,529 square feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
And with those changes that you've just discussed, the proposed FAR is 153%, which is 5,036 square feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, to put everything in perspective, there's essentially nothing with either the property or the structure that complies with the zoning. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's actually no building envelope following the setback guidelines set for this lot being on the corner with two front yards. So virtually everything falls, any object we place there will have either a front and side or side and rear yard setback relief.
It's non-compliant with regard to lot size, lot depth, lot width, and every setback. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So let's just frame what the existing setbacks are before we talk about what the new the modifications we're making are going to be setback-wise. The existing building, well, let's do coverage. The existing building coverage is 59%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The existing front yard setback is 3.45 feet. Is that correct? Front yard setback.
That is correct.
The existing north side, that's the side away from Green Street, setback is 2.32 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The building currently encroaches 2.92 feet into the Green Street right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in the zone, for non-residential buildings, it's required that the setback is 50 feet from all of the property lines. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So now let's talk about our variances.
And our lot's 35 feet wide, so we're out.
35 feet wide by 94 feet deep.
Correct.
Both of which are non-compliant.
Correct.
And the property is 3,295, is that right?
95, 94, something like that, yes.
3,295 square
yes.
feet. Now let's talk about the modifications that we're making and what the result of those modifications is in terms of the setbacks. Let's do building coverage first. It's 59% now. It goes to 79%. Could you explain that?
So really that relates to the porch and the porch back here.
So that's the porches. Now the front porch steps, or stairs rather, would you go over where they are and what those setbacks are?
So presently, those steps are sitting right here. Obviously, we're going to rebuild them. They're going to look the same. But when we're done, they're going to slide forward towards Witherspoon just a little bit, and the front steps will be 1.6 feet back off the property line on Witherspoon. And they'll be 16.87 feet off of our north line, the mid-block line on Witherspoon. And they'll be 12.11 feet off of our property line on Green Street.
Now the front porch, the proposed front porch.
The front porch, right here, will be 9.56 feet off of Witherspoon Street. It will be 0.53 feet off of Green Street, or off our property line on Green Street, and it will be 5.83 feet from our mid-block north side property line along here.
And the ADA, the front ADA accessible ramp.
The ramp will be 9.4 feet off of Witherspoon Street. It will be a half a foot off of our property line on Green Street. And it will be proposed north side, front, they do 23.7 feet from our north side.
The rear ADA accessible ramp and the bench that's attached to it. We're next.
Okay. The rear setback of the rear ramp will be 13.31 feet off the rear yard, which is, let's call it our westerly property line, our other mid-block line. It will be 3.18 feet from our south or Green Street property line. It'll be 14.26 feet from our north or other mid-block property line.
There are two proposed air conditioning condenser units. Would you point out on the plan where they are?
They're located right here next to the Bilco doors that go down into the basement.
And what are those proposed setbacks?
The condenser unit, one is 4.82 from the north property line, or our mid-block line, and it's 27.77 feet from the Green Street line, and the rear yard is 29 feet. That's it.
And the rear yard setback of the rear porch?
So the rear porch is the little piece here on the corner over our ramp and stair entrance to the building, and that is 36.15 feet from our rear yard, 25.54 feet from our north property line. And those stairs that you were about to ask me about, Dan, are 31.43 feet from our rear property line and 31.88 feet from our north property line.
Now, the Green Street side, let's talk about the rear porch and stairs. It's got a little asterisk, so read the whole thing.
So this is where we have additional encroachment into the public right-of-way, which we will seek relief from mayor and council. So we are negative 2.6 feet on our setback there. So that's the little piece right here. And the proposed side yard setback, proposed rear porch and steps minus 2.6 feet as they are proposed to encroach into the public right-of-way. There is an existing easement for the portion of the existing building encroaching into the public right-of-way. If application is approved, the easement agreement will be required to be amended and approved by mayor and council, or the proposed rear porch and any associated stairs will not be permitted to extend beyond the property line.
Now let's talk about the trash enclosure. Would you please point out where that is on the plan?
Here's the trash enclosure, and if I may, could I show you a little picture of that? Would this be A10, Karen?
This would be A11, right?
A11?
Exhibit A11, what does Exhibit A11 show?
A11 is sheet A305. And this is a rear yard view looking essentially from the neighbor's property, which happens to also be owned by Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, looking into the backyard on the northern side of our ramp. And here you can see those two condensers that we talked about for the air conditioning unit. Here are the Bilco doors that go into the basement. Here's a bicycle rack on the back side of the railing of the ramp, and here's a trash enclosure. And now that trash enclosure will be 12.64 feet from the rear yard and 10.95 feet from the north side yard, the yard that's over here, and 20.8 feet from the property line on Green Street.
And how is the trash picked up?
They open, you'll roll the cans down the sidewalk or the driveway to the street, and they'll be placed on Green Street on Mondays, I think it is.
Yeah.
Tuesdays. Thank you.
Saturday?
Put them out Monday, and they pick them up Tuesday. Okay, that was a quick recovery. And these Bilco doors that you see here, their setbacks are 21.28 on the side yard to the south, 9.27 to the side yard on the north, and 30.64 from the rear yard.
Now, you've already pointed out where the signage is. Would you just describe what the size of each of those lettering situations are?
The gallery letters sign and the ropes and gallery, the two words that flank the corner on Green and Witherspoon, are 2.33 square feet in size. The two signs over the doors off the rear porch are 1.25 square feet in size. The existing historic plaque is 3 square feet. The bronze plaque, talking about the Robeson family, is 3 square feet in size.
There is one parking space on the site now. Would you please show where that is?
Right there.
What's
But that
gonna-
might not be, you know, we should enter this as an exhibit because I've been pointing to it.
Exhibit A12, which is the variance.
It's a site plan. It's a site plan C100.
That's exhibit A12.
We have an existing driveway today that actually goes within 3 or 4 feet of the property line, and it can fit 1.5 cars. We actually are proposing to shorten that driveway, remove some impervious coverage, so it only fits 1 car, so no one will try to pull the second car up into the driveway and leave its tail hanging out over the sidewalk on Green Street, which is an unfortunate and annoying condition to the neighbors on Green Street. So we actually are proposing here to shorten it, and that's where the driveway will be. It's existing. The curb cut is existing. The sidewalk is existing. We will redo the surface of the driveway with a porous paver, and yes, it's pretty steep.
On-site.
On-site.
The on-site portion of the driveway
Right.
will be replaced with porous paving.
And we'll
We're gonna leave
correct
the-
that steepness a little bit.
Part in the right-of-way, as I understand it, is going to be left the way it is because of preserving a street tree?
Yeah, there's a beautiful catalpa, very mature catalpa here, right to the east of the curb cut. And in speaking with the municipal arborist, the previous one, she was very adamant that we not rip up the concrete around it because she felt we would do damage to its established root base. So we're going to leave all of that in place. May I correct one thing I said earlier where I misspoke?
Sure. Please.
There are not 2 front yard setbacks. There's just 1 front yard setback off of Witherspoon. When it turns into a mixed commercial use, the condition of, like a residential condition, there are 2 front yard setbacks on a corner does not apply. Is that correct?
Green Street's a side yard.
Green Street's a side yard. I said to you before it was a front yard, and that's not correct.
There's
guess
just
I
one
wasn't
front yard.
listening.
What's that?
There's just one front yard,
There's
period.
1 front yard, and that's Witherspoon.
Witherspoon Street's the front yard, green is a
When I was
side.
reading all these setbacks, I realized I misspoke.
Okay, so we're requesting a use variance. Let's finish with parking. There's 1 parking space.
Yes.
One of the, in Mr. Bridger's, epistle about the required parking in the CB zone, the highest parking issue really has to do with the meeting room. That's premised on the fact that there would be 50 seats in that meeting room. Is that correct? That would be
yeah.
extremely tight.
That would be packing the room full of chairs in a seating condition like auditorium seating here, and that's absolutely the max, and be pretty
Few and far
rare.
between?
Pretty rare.
Few and far
More generally, the types of meeting that our group sponsors will have 20 to 25 people from the community attending.
And you feel, having lived there and being a Princeton guy, you feel that there is adequate parking nearby with the public parking
Well, there's
in order to accommodate whatever demand there might be.
Well, there's a significant amount of parking in the Spring Street garage and the Palmer Square garage within 2 blocks, and there's significant on-street parking. And the number of times where we would have any really significant occupant load in this building will be, fairly rare, a couple times a month.
We're requesting a use variance. The mixed-use building is not a permitted use in the R4 zone. So we have to demonstrate special reasons. There are parts of what we're doing that start to hint towards inherently beneficial use, but we're not saying that what we're proposing is an inherently beneficial use. So we need to prove that there are special reasons and that we satisfy the negative criteria for the requested variance. What can we say about special reasons in terms of the purposes of zoning?
Well, I think there are 2 important conditions. One is the fact that the Robeson family lived in this home for close to 20 years, and Paul Robeson Jr. was born there, and Paul Robeson Jr. was, a significant 20th century figure, and Elizabeth has summed up his history, so I won't do that for you. I know you all know.
So you feel that this is, would it be fair to say you feel this site is particularly well-suited, even uniquely well-suited for this proposed use, because Paul Robeson was only born in one place?
Correct. And this building has existed for 176 years, and it's pretty much built at the same time that the Witherspoon Street Church, the Witherspoon Street Church for Colored People, as it was originally called, as they split off from Nassau Pres after there was a fire that caused them to leave the building. And they were, you know, in the building, they were in the balcony, but they were there. And then Witherspoon, and then Nassau Pres said, yeah, maybe we should have another arrangement. This house and that church grew together. And they've had a long history. They've had times of separation. They've had times where it was the church manse. So the history not only of the Robeson family, and the Robeson family is an extraordinary family. William Drew Robeson Sr. Is just an amazing, remarkable man who Paul is in his shadow, actually. This man was so amazing, an escaped slave who got himself through Lincoln University and taught his children Greek and Latin on Sunday afternoons at the dinner table around the house, and was largely removed from his parsonage on trumped-up charges of not supporting his congregation, when in fact he was going around to white Princetonians advocating for his congregation at a time when that was socially unacceptable. And he paid a heavy price for that, and eventually lost his job, lost his home, his position there, eventually left Princeton, went to Westfield, went to Somerville, where candidly he was embraced, and his children were embraced in a way they weren't always in Princeton. So it's a challenging history that's remarkable, and that tells not only a Princeton story, but an American story. And the fact that we have the opportunity to take this building and use it to tell that story and the story of the neighborhood, which is so firmly bound together in these people, is a unique opportunity. I don't think there's any other building in the neighborhood where this can happen. There's certainly not one with such a prominent position on the corner of Green and Witherspoon Street. You know, originally, African-American neighborhood stretched up to Nassau Street. And Palmer Square was the beginning of an eradication movement that pushed this population farther north away from the university. And then when Jackson Street was eviscerated in urban renewal in the 60s, it was another step in pushing this neighborhood farther to the north. And it's been reduced and reduced to a point now that we've created a historic district to try to salvage what's there. This building pins down the corner of that district. And I can't think of anything, any single building more appropriate than this building to tell this story.
There are a couple purposes of, there are a couple.
No. It's true, but no clapping, if you please.
I'm not running for anything anymore, so just...
There are a couple of purposes of zoning that I'd like to bring to your attention or ask you to speak to, continuing on a positive criteria. Purpose of zoning, the purposes of zoning are in NJSA 4055D, Section 2. Subsection I says to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Do you feel the rehabilitation, the renovation, the retrofitting, whatever you call it, of this building satisfies that, addresses that purpose of zoning?
Yes, I do.
And J, to promote the conservation of historic sites and districts, open space, energy resources, valuable natural resources in the state, and to prevent urban sprawl and degradation of the environment through improper use of land. That conservation of historic sites and districts, do you feel that we're addressing that purpose of zoning?
Absolutely.
And the sort of standard subsection A, the general welfare, that section also talks about promoting public health, safety, morals. I'd like you, as an architect, and as a member of the board, to focus on safety Our ADA, I mean,
We are taking the building from a private 10-bedroom enclosed structure to something that's open to the public. And by making it open to the public, we're improving accessibility to the building, we're improving its bathroom standards, and we're improving its fire safety. We're going to sprinkler this building. We're going to give it a higher level of construction than it could candidly support as an ongoing single-family home.
and through our education, community empowerment, and involvement programming, we could be addressing those public morals in a very positive way. Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Now, with the bulk variances, it's really the size and shape of the property and size and context and content of the building that's driving those variances. Is that correct?
Well, absolutely. The shape of the property and the shape of the building exceeding the property makes any move we make a variance.
And it would be a hardship. It would be impractical for us to address these concerns that we have, safety and accessibility, without this variance relief. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And, could you feel that the deviation from the ordinance standards, that it's more good than it is bad? There's no substantial, in the balancing picture, the difference between the benefit of what we're doing versus any deviation from the zoning standards. Do you feel it's a positive weighing that we have there?
I do. It would be a crime to lose the opportunity of bringing this building to full neighborhood use.
Do you feel there'd be any substantial detriment to the public good or impairment of the intent and purpose of the zone plan or the zoning ordinance if this variance relief were to be granted?
No, I do not.
We agree to all the recommendations that have been suggested by the Historic Preservation Commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we'll discuss the various comments that are in the engineering and zoning memo with our next witness, the stormwater management and other things. So that's all the questions that I have. Is that all the questions I had?
Yes. Yes, sir. Or maybe that was Barry's.
I have a couple, but only a couple of them for you. One is, what will the skin be when you take off the others and put on a new one?
Thank you for that, because I should have mentioned it. We found in an inside wall that was previously an outside wall that had a chimney built against it, probably in the 1880s, or it was for coal use, the original siding, which was a 4-inch wooden clapboard siding. We are going to do a 4-inch clapboard exposure siding. We're actually going to use a sustainable material called boral, which is a rot-resistant material that is actually made out of recycled fly ash, but it will look to everybody in the world like 4-inch clapboard siding, and it'll be painted white.
White, okay. And Ben, did Paul Robeson grow up in the house, or was he just born there?
He was born there and lived there as a young child, and probably by the age of 4, moved down Green Street, 3 to 4. I'm looking at the...
She hadn't been sworn in, so...
Okay. Yeah, so, no, he did not grow up there. He actually grew up in Westfield and Somerville. His high school years were spent in Somerville, New Jersey.
Okay. Ben, you said you were going to have to do some fundraising before construction starts. When will construction start, and how long do you anticipate it taking?
We have 10% of the money we need to do the project in the bank right now. So as soon as we line up our municipal approvals and satisfy staff requirements, Elizabeth has said she'll grant us a permit to fix the roof, which is the first thing we need to do. We need to rebuild this roof and deal with some of these insulation and leak problems. So we would like to get that underway, maybe right after Labor Day. As far as the duration, that is funding dependent.
And
it's at least a couple of years.
And do you see any fundraising activities in that building? Are you going to charge office space, for instance, or would you charge for the bedroom space, or would you charge for the meeting room space?
As a non-profit organization, we do use, there is a question, the issue of sustainability, and we will use both the set and assess certain fees for the use of the office space, meeting room space, and the bedroom.
Good. Thank you.
Do you have an idea of who might be interested in using those offices now, or?
Yes, we've had several offers already. There is a program that's being held at the university, a STEM project, a science, called the Du Bois Scholars. And that is a project that is ongoing and has been for several years, and they are seeking offices. We also have had other nonprofits who requested temporary organizations with various funding projects that they want to do. So we believe very strongly that we'll have a good response because there's a need for it in the community. Again, these are not always going to be long-term reasons.
And just to continue on that, in the same manner as upstairs, we don't imagine some group would rent this office and move in and stay there for 5 years. We imagine the office would be used for this program for the summer duration while they're administering their summer camp at Princeton, and then someone else might actually use it in the fall. So the idea is to make something available on a rotating short-term basis. It's not a terribly large office. It's a 10 by 5 room. So it's 10 by 15 room. So
Right. One other question. I think you said you agreed with all the historical preservation recommendations, all of them?
yes.
Is there a way to designate the parking spot as variable use as opposed to just handicap, since?
Well, actually, we can't fit a handicap space there because we don't have the side aisle width. So we resolved with HPC that would not be an accessible space.
Good. It didn't look like that would be.
We don't have the side loading clearance to offload. So
Okay.
it will just be a standard parking space.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You have another witness?
Can I ask one question related to the programming of this space? How do you anticipate the use as being primarily weekdays, weekends, evenings? Can you describe that?
24 hours a day, 7 days.
The meetings would probably
That's what I mean, the
be
meetings, not the
evenings or
residential.
weekends.
Yeah.
But those two little offices for the group that needed to organize their event, they might be in there during the weekday working. But we don't imagine any weekday meeting use of any significant number. There might be a small group that would meet in there, but to have community neighborhood stuff, it would have to be when people probably aren't working.
The hour is getting late. You have another witness, I believe.
Mr. Ingram, would you raise your right hand, please?
Mr. Ingram, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Ingram, what's your profession, your occupation?
I am an engineer and planner.
Would you please tell, I don't know if you appeared before this board?
Once about a year or so ago for the Unitarian Church.
Perhaps
We can accept it.
Thank you.
It's what he says that's important.
Mr. Haggerty, is Mr. Ingram testifying as both an expert in engineering and planning?
Yes.
Okay.
Without repeating what's already been said, let's focus on the site plan and go over some of the comments that are in the engineering and zoning memo so that we can apply to this.
Sure.
I think it's the backside of the A12.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll mark this as Exhibit A.
That'll be A13 or something.
A13, and this is your variance plan, is that correct? Site.
Correct.
Let's go out of order a little bit and talk about stormwater management first. Is that okay?
Sure.
What we are proposing.
So we are adding approximately 600 square feet and change of impervious surface on the site. As was requested in the memo, we have revised the plans to try and limit the amount of impervious surface that we're showing. We did that, one, by removing area from the back of the parking stall. And even though it's not on site, our original plans had us proposing to do sidewalk all the way to the curb line to provide a wider sidewalk. But on recommendation, we've removed that to create some green space along the street. And again, doing what we could to limit that surface. Our proposal for stormwater management would be to install porous material in the tree well in the courtyard, as well as in the replaced driveway area that is on the site. We're also open to considering some sort of a dry well structure or something within the ramp in the rear of the site to provide further mitigating measures. But we're happy to work with staff to make sure that what we propose is acceptable and reduces our stormwater flows.
So the courtyard would be forced pavers. The driveway, on-site portion driveway would be forced pavers.
Yes.
The ramp is going to be forced, as Mr. Wilkes explained.
Yes.
And can we sort of mathematically convert the 600 square feet versus the forest stuff? Because I think that 400 square feet would require you to do the stormwater management. Is that right, Mr. Bass? Or 600 plus?
Right. So we can easily pick up approximately 400 square feet of area by doing that. So what that'll effectively do is, put us at about 200 square feet that may not be mitigated, which would be below the 400 square foot threshold. We will try to do as many measures as we can, but really our lot is constrained by the fact that it's primarily building, and we just have so many areas that we can actually pick up effectively without compromising other aspects of the plan. So our intention, again, will be to work with staff to provide a maximum amount of storage that we can within those areas.
So we totally agree that it be subject to the approval, the review and approval of the operation of the municipal engineer's office in devising plans, etc. It's recommended that we add 2 tree wells and plant 2 columnar street trees on Green Street. We agree to that, is that correct?
Yes.
And we will coordinate that with the municipal arborist, correct?
Yes.
A solid fence is suggested to be added on the northerly and westerly property lines. We agree to add that on the westerly property line, which is the one
As shown on the bottom of the page, correct.
parallel to Witherspoon Street.
Yes.
But we don't want to put that solid wall on the northerly side because we own the westerly road or the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church owns the property next to it, 112. So there will be going back and forth. So, and we did discuss that with the Historic Preservation Commission. We know your recommendations. We agree that all sidewalks within the municipal right of way will be concrete. We agree with that, correct?
Yes.
It's been suggested or recommended that the existing handicap ramp in the public right of way at the intersection of Witherspoon and Green Street should be ADA compliant. We agree to address that comment. Is that correct?
We do.
We agree that the existing overhead electric, phone, and cable will be installed underground. Is that correct?
Yes.
Where does the electricity and the rest come from if it's installed underground? It's just underground on your property with a big pole at the...
Right, wherever the pole
edge of it?
is, it will remain and it'll come down from there.
Yeah.
Our main utilities come along
So
right now.
rather than running a wire, you go down and under?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The general recommendations on page 7 of the engineering and zoning report, we do agree with what the performance guarantee requirements are. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we do understand that if the existing easement is not amended, in order to include the extra, I think, Mr. Moore said it was for the little wider porch and the stairs in the back. We do understand that if that amendment is not granted, we would have to put the porch back on the property line. Is that correct?
Yes. I think one thing we did want to mention is with the landscape beds on the front steps. It's comment on
Comment 3.
on page 5. There was a suggestion to install landscape beds along on either side of the front stairs. It would be our preference not to do that so that we could maintain use of that area as occupiable space with the benches that we had suggested, just so that it remains open and usable. That's really our only request for an exception.
And can remain neat and tight. It's very hard to maintain any vegetation on the grass strip because of the traffic which is really good question. But we will keep that grass strip and we will keep it sure. Can I ask you, during your prayers act, to speak to the variances that we're requesting, particularly use variances?
Sure. And I think the architect went through it very succinctly, the many variances required and what the C variances especially and what their reasonings are. With regard to the D variances, you've heard testimony regarding the FAR and why that number is going up. And again, the actual footprint that you see here is not really changing. We're adding the porch, we're adding a handicap ramp. Other than that, exteriorly, there's no additions to that structure. But probably more importantly with the use variances, I think clearly a point was made that this is the only site in which this kind of a use can have the significance that it truly does. In terms of purposes of zoning, purposes A, G, I, and J were all mentioned, and I believe that the reasons that were presented are certainly accurate and true. We're providing what is as close to an inherently beneficial use as you could possibly have. This is a nonprofit hoping to provide space to serve the community and provide community space. We're certainly preserving a historic monument in this case and trying to design it and propose uses that appeal to that historic character. Our upgrades certainly, I believe, will be an upgrade to the visual environment, and the safety upgrades and access upgrades are truly a benefit. I saw nothing in the zone plan or zone ordinance that would really receive a detriment with this application. I believe we're fitting in with the character and the surrounding properties that are around us. We're adjacent to the Arts Council. We have adjacent properties to the church, which is going to own and operate this facility. So I do believe that we're meeting that character of this area of the neighborhood. So for those reasons, I did not see any negative impacts associated with this proposal.
With regard to the bulk variances, you can apply based upon the size, shape of the property, the building itself, the existing building itself, that we can satisfy the positive criteria in terms of the property, the structures, and in terms of any deviation from the zoning ordinance requirement being okay.
Yes, we certainly have a hardship here due to the minimal size of the lot, the location of the building as it exists. A lot of these are upgrades which have a positive purpose to them, and there's no way to get them without variances associated with it. But again, being that we own the adjacent property and where the building is and the visual impacts or really lack thereof from what we're proposing, I see no negative impacts to the variances that we're requesting. They should only enhance the property.
Inshallah. Okay. Are there people in the audience that wish to address this case? If you wish to, we will provide you with a microphone, and you should swear to be truthful, and then we will be able to listen. Would you? It's better to hold it. That way you can put it where you like.
Okay. My name is Yaina Moore. I live at 19 Green Street.
Ms. Moore, hate to interrupt you. Do you swear affirm any testimony you give will be truthful?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Like 95% of the properties in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, the Robeson House property was built decades before zoning was instituted. As has been outlined, it is non-compliant on just about every category or attribute or requirement, except, I think, building height. Let's be frank. That zoning was designed to transform the neighborhood into larger lots and essentially wipe out the more affordable, at the time, compact houses and lots to further eradicate the African American population. My parents were members of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and I was christened there. So I knew well the history of the Robesons as a child, and I grew up running between our house on Green Street and this house. This house was owned by the Ellerby family. Miss Gladys Taylor was the last owner of that family. I want to describe a bit more about their stewardship and the use of the house in the interim between the Robesons and now that it is returned to the church's ownership. The building has always had a combination of rooming house and commercial function, so this would really not be a change except for there not being a resident occupant owner. Ms. Gladys rented rooms to short-term tenants, what is similarly being described here, a year or less, and rented the ground floor shop after the other uses in terms of the porters using that area to a local tailor. She ran her own seamstress business. You're not hearing it? You want it closer or further away? Oh, sorry. I don't have to go. Fix it for me, Derek, please. Is that better?
That's better. Much, thank you.
Okay. Let me turn on my little device here again. As I was saying, I want to describe a bit more about the Ellerby family's stewardship and use of the house in the interim between the Robesons' occupancy and the church having repurchased it. The building has always had a combination of rooming house and commercial functions. Miss Gladys Taylor, who was the last Ellerby family member who owned the house and sold it back to the church, rented rooms to short-term tenants for a year or less, and rented the ground floor shop to a local tailor. She herself, and that's the little corner shop that is being proposed as the gallery, was a seamstress who sewed for local women mostly, and the McCarter Theater. She did all of the costuming for the McCarter plays. A lot of business was done in this house as a commercial entity. She used, after the tailor left, she used the basement space herself, and she used one of the spaces that has been referred to as a bedroom, but the front room, proposed as an office, as her sewing room. The change here only involves that there is no longer an owner-occupant who's resident in the building. And I think there was a question about how these various uses would be managed and how, in particular, the residential population, it being described in different levels. I think another pamphlet talked about there being resident scholars coming from from institutions perhaps that needed temporary space. Would that be handled? And I think that's a legitimate question. It's certainly not like this is a halfway house, however. And we have had that on Green Street, and that had its challenges. So I'm confident that the church, its management and involvement in the building on many different levels will ensure that our residential neighborhood will not be negatively impacted. I think that one of the areas of concern, however, and we hate to have to talk about it, is parking. There'll be a greater demand for it from all of the uses, needless to say, but mostly the gallery visitation. And it would be good if the town could actually work out an opportunity with the garage for people to be able to park there. So I hope that the church will make that arrangement, because our residential streets have had to suffer and supply commercial parking needs for the downtown, when many of the houses on the street don't have sufficient parking of their own. So we have to consider that as well, and I think there should be some special dispensation for providing parking passes and or discounts and the like for the building. I don't see that the change in use from resident to a commercial use, or if it's going to fit more like in the RB type of definition of the zone, or is significant because of its prior uses, and that the zoning is fairly restrictive and not relevant to how the neighborhood really operated. So I'm 100% in favor of this building returning to the broad use of the neighborhood. As before the church built its large community room, this house served as almost the church house under the Illuby ownership, where many dinners and events after service were held there. So it would just continue in that vein. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to do a similar thing?
Good evening. My name is Jim Waltman. I'm the Executive Director of the Watershed Institute.
Sir, if you'd
Yes.
raise your right hand, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
I do.
Thank you.
Until a couple months ago, we were known as the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association. We're now the Watershed Institute. I want to just say a few words. One, I'm very pleased that among the many requests for variances, there was no request to waive the new stormwater ordinance that Princeton adopted last year. And I want to say that we're very pleased with the conversation that we've had with Mr. Wilkes and with their willingness to incorporate a number of changes to the proposal that will do a very good job in managing the stormwater runoff, the porous paving and the porous approach to the ramp in particular. So we're pleased to be working with the applicant and look forward to this being constructed. On a personal level, I grew up in Princeton. I'm a proud graduate of the Princeton Public Schools. But I have to say, unfortunately, I can't remember ever learning about Paul Robeson in the schools. I hope that happens now. I learned about Robeson, fortunately, from parents who were very fascinated, intrigued, and proud that this incredible human was part of the town that we lived in. So I think this is a wonderful, important, very important for the community, for the culture, and for the history of this town. And we're very excited to be working and speaking with these gentlemen that brought this forward tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. I see nobody else either. Are you coming to say something? Okay. Come. You'll have to be sworn in to behave.
Sir, just state your name first, please.
Edward McClure.
And sir, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
My wife and I live at 13 Green Street, which happens to be the house where the Robeson family moved when they left the manse, under discussion. We've been there.
Maybe you can pull the microphone up. It's difficult to hear you.
We've lived at 13 Green Street since the 1980s, and we support the application for all these variances. And we look forward very much to seeing the building renovated and put to such good use. That's all I have to say.
Good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Do you want to make some closing statements before we go? You said all you need to say. Okay? Then we will go into executive session.
Can I just?
You can come again and say something.
I just want to thank you all for your patience tonight, and I'm especially proud to be a part of this project and these wonderful people. I don't know. I know you're accustomed to having large support groups with you, but I'm especially pleased to see many members of the neighborhood and the board of directors and advisors who are here at this hearing. It's a wonderful project when you have as much support from the community. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now in executive session. What is your pleasure?
I want to ask one more question, may I?
To whom do you wish to address
Well,
the
to the counselor.
Okay.
I'm all for this, 100% for it, but the community has an overt need for affordable housing. Did you all think at all about turning this into affordable housing units?
No, you're thinking more globally than that.
We are going to be providing affordable housing. There's no question about that. It just isn't going to fit within the purview of what affordable housing can be managed as and dealt with under code. So we're going to be providing real affordable housing. The county just won't get it.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm sure you all discussed it, but I thought I'd like to hear the answer, so thank you.
Okay, so let's now try and make a decision.
I move we approve the project.
There seems to be some.
I move we approve the project.
We have a motion to approve,
I would second it.
and we have a seconder to the motion.
Could I suggest a couple of
We
conditions?
need the D issue to be thought of as well, huh?
I was
Or
going to
is it
suggest,
all
I was going to
the
suggest a
package?
couple of conditions to the motion, if I might, and then we'll see if that's acceptable to Mr. Schreiber. And the second, compliance with the HPC recommended conditions, compliance with the recommendations in the memo by Mr. Bridger, Mr. West, as testified to by the applicant. In the event the applicant cannot obtain an expanded encroachment easement, that the porch will need to be pushed back to the property line. I believe the applicant indicated if it's determined that they have to register these units with the rental housing office, they will do so. And the last thing is not something that the board has discussed, but the zoning officer and I were discussing briefly. Earlier this night, we dealt with the borough ordinance that provides variances expire in a year. And the zoning officer and I were discussing perhaps the board might want to add a provision granting an extension of 1 year under that ordinance under certain circumstances, because the ordinance talks about good cause shown. So perhaps the board might be willing to indicate that good cause to them would be inability or delays in getting third-party agency approvals, provided they've been diligently pursuing them. And I guess the other big factor with them would be fundraising delays, meaning an inability to begin the project. The other thing Mr. Bridger and I talked about was the possibility that if an initial permit is drawn, and I don't know, would that satisfy that ordinance provision, meaning you've pulled a permit, your variances are now vested? So I think maybe Mr. Bridger could address that better.
I would just suggest that you comply with all the site plan conditions, so you get signed site plans, and then at that point, you can apply for a building permit so that you're protected, and you don't need an extension. And that building permit is good. Kevin's well aware of this, as long as you do work within the year, and it can be extended basically indefinitely to help your project move along. So.
Mm-hmm.
So you want your piece as a condition of?
Yeah, we wanted to
I
give them,
lost between the two.
we wanted to kind of clarify what's good cause so that there's not confusion. I mean, our ordinance is at a little bit at odds with the MLUL in terms of a site plan. So we're just trying to give them some flexibility to work with this project and to make it come to fruition without having to needlessly come back for extensions and waste time and money. So.
Okay. Is that? Okay, so we have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion of the motion, or are we ready to vote? I see no discussion being requested. Could you call the roll for us then, please, Claudia?
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tennable?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
It is approved.
It's them you have to thank. Okay, so we are adjourned.